Meeting to order today. Today is Thursday, May the 9th, 2024, not Friday. I've been thinking all day long it was Friday, so bear with me. But the meeting starts at 1 o'clock, and now that Kevin Call is present, we'll get her started. So it says draft operating budget update. So Ms. Compton, Mr. Coffey, you guys are in charge.
Well, we're ready to talk. There it is.
right.
Does that thing work? So since the last meeting, we wanted to give you an update, and there we go. All right. So since the last time we talked about, and we've got all the numbers are in front of you. They're stapled there on your desk. That build the data behind these numbers that are on the screen now. This is just the summary, essentially the summary for the general fund specifically. Here, the utility fund is still a little bit different, obviously, because it's a utility, but that information is in your packet as well. Our goal last time was to maintain, we were balanced at the last meeting. We talked about what do you want to do with compensation. You all agreed that let's go forward with the idea that we could do the option number 2, which added about $585,000 to the operating expenses. It included a COLA and then taking a step with the experience-based pay, given our experience-based pay structure. So we took those expenses, we added those to the expense side, and then we made the revenue assumptions that we talked about at the meeting. We incorporated those, and then we set about balancing the budget by looking for opportunities to cut costs. And we think the department heads, which are all generally represented here, we wanted them here. So you all would, if you all had any questions for them, they're going to talk about their capital again as we go through the day. But we wanted them here to confirm for you that it's a collective effort. I didn't go through there and cut any expenses. They did generally on their own. And so we appreciate their effort. This isn't possible unless they're willing to work and to do those things. And so after that, those two big considerations, we have arrived at a point where we have an operating expenditure of $22,177, and we have projected revenues at $22,223. So we have a budget surplus of $46,000 today. And what that means is that is unassigned. Revenue over expenditures, when all that netted out, of about $46,000. So there's a couple questions ultimately. So this is a balanced budget. With that money that is included in the operating expenses, we essentially funded the community agencies at the level they were at last year. So if you look at the detailed spreadsheet that we've given you back in there, when you get into the community agencies, you'll see that I think last year, the allocation for some of the non-shared agencies was about 155. I think when we went through it, when Lee and I went through it and we assigned values to all of them, we ended up at like 159. So it's essentially the same number as a placeholder in the budget last year. It includes $50,000 for the EDA, includes the baseline for the EDC, and it's ultimately up to you guys to tell us the baseline that we had been contributing, which was the $100,000 number. So that's in there as a placeholder. And ultimately, we need some advice from you folks on what you all want to do from here. Okay? Now, the $46,000, so you got a couple just front-end options with that. You can just not assign that. You can leave that as a surplus. You could also just say, well, we want to reassign it in this way and give us some direction on how you want to reassign that. You could add it to the EDC, you could add it to homelessness, you could add it to some other initiative. What I would suggest to you, when we go to the budget surveys, which we got that on the next slide, the police and fire was a big emphasis from the public's perspective. We know that we're down a couple police officers. We know we're down at least one firefighter. My suggestion would be, if you're looking for my input on what to do with that money, I would argue that you probably should figure out a way to pump that back towards that initial police hire, and then ask us to figure out how to balance it with doing that. because we talked about prioritizing those rehires as one police officer first, and then the two positions, police and fire, after that. So does anyone want to talk about just kind of that? It's pretty it's pretty basic what we did from last time to get to this point. Do y'all have any obvious questions from the last budget meeting after you sat down with the numbers? You got all the department heads here. What operating questions do you have?
I have one about the 159,000. That's community agencies that were funded last year.
Correct.
Doesn't include anybody that's a new request, I assume, right?
It does not include, before I speak, let me double check. It does not include any new requests from new entities.
Okay.
It does slightly increase, I believe it slightly increases some of the existing ones that we have and kind of moves it around a little bit. It is about 4,000 more than we allocated last year, but it's not any of the new ones. So we included that intentionally as this is a quote-unquote baseline compared to previous years.
And the second question, Mr. Coffey mentioned the EDA and the DVCDC. And those numbers are in,
So that is in your non-departmental section, which is on page 11. So in this budget, we funded the EDA at $50,000 for operations, which mirrors last year for operations. And then we funded as a baseline, the Development Corporation at $100,000 because last year, while it was $150,000, we did include $50,000 for the creation of the community website. So that $100,000 is operations. So that's our baseline for them, or that's what we consider a baseline for them at this point.
Some of the questions with the PDI program that the EDA is dealing with, honestly, you should get towards an actual construction dollar before you look at how much more you're investing in that. So right now, they're speculating on what that future cost will be. They need to develop the concept a little bit more with the roadway, for example. They need to advertise that and get actual construction dollars. That is infrastructure. It's going to be funded out of reserves anyway and as a capital project. So I would wait until you actually had construction dollars before you rather than assume how much money you want to pump into the EDA to finish that project out. I think you need to wait until you have an engineered set of drawings, you have actual construction cost, and then you can reasonably say where the stopping point is. And so it might not be $100,000, it might not be $500,000, it could be $275,000, right? Like a random number that you just don't know what it is yet. So I would say you need to hold that until that gets a little further developed.
okay. Mr. Collins, you have a question?
Well, it's more of a comment, and it related to the Development Corp. It's hard to argue against the police and fire, but I think at some point we're going to have to realize that we're going to have to put more money into the actual Development Corps, because to me, we've always asked them to do more with less, or expected champagne results on a beer budget. So at some point, they need some more help, and there's a few other things they need, which, if successful, would help us with all this other stuff. So this may not be the year for that, but it's something we need to consider soon.
Yeah, we've got a slide at the end after we get all the way through the numbers that we can talk about that a little more depth, if you want, and really revisit the foundation of it and try to think about how to approach that very question.
I have a question. I did.
Mr. Cottle?
It says the revenue is through April 30th.
So we went back in, and so normally when we create revenue projections, we start in February.
Yeah.
Right, and you can predict what you're gonna collect in, April, and March. And like April is a quarter end, the
Right.
quarter ends in March, so you get that collection in April. So we went back in and looked at what we had collected year-to-date through April and revised some of the general fund revenue in your, not really occupational taxes, because we had already set on that 10.5 number. But some of the other items that had not been looked at very closely, well, they've looked at closely, but not since February, to say, like, for instance, one of our franchise taxes, we adjusted based on what we had collected for the year, because those tend to correlate. So we did, so it's a little bit less conservative than we were in fiscal year '24 budget, but we also did not go back this far and reassess numbers. Those revenue numbers really were set in February for fiscal year '24. So I think you're gonna have a much closer to actual budget than we have in the last, at least 2 years. So we did revise several of them.
And this does not include the police officer and firefighters back in the budget.
It doesn't. It does include the COLA, and the step in the experience scale for all funds and departments.
And it doesn't include, does it include the, whatever, the sergeant?
It doesn't
reallocate for the
include
police
any of
department?
those additional
Okay.
folks.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, let's continue.
So this was the profile of the community agencies, and a lot of the discussion tied to the community agencies has been dealing with the homeless issue. So what we did was, and we appreciate Melanie's work on this because I think she communicated this very well. We took the request and we broke it down into those 4 basic categories, and I think this is really illustrates kind of where the money is going. You're spending quite a bit on shared agencies, the airport board, the development corporation, et cetera. You've got the additional things that the city does for economic development, the Civil Air Patrol, the Brass Band Festival, Pioneer Playhouse, Sister Cities, West T Hill. So you can see kind of how we viewed those agencies. You have, for lack of better description, community health and wellness. We think that's a good description of those. Now, Greenhouse 17, for example, and Nursing Home Ombudsman and CASA really fit that category. Shepherd's House, you could really move Shepherd's House over to the homeless housing, food insecurity, probably, I don't know. Y'all would have to, because there's a lot of those issues that are more probably aligned with that category. If that's the case, then in 2024, you spent about $22,000 to $24,000 on the quote homeless issue, homeless initiative, right? So the question is, do you all want to add more to that pot, and in what way do you want to add to that pot? And so on the community agencies going forward into next week, what I'd like for you to do is to think about these, and we'll ask you what you think about these categories right now in a minute, but we're going to give you a spreadsheet in the same way we do every year. We're going to do that after the meeting today. We'd ask that you fill out with those agencies that have made a request to the commission, you fill out what your recommendation is as individuals. We'll take that Monday night, then we'll overlay that on at the regular commission meeting. We'll take a minute and try to reassess what your averages are versus what we included in the budget today. Okay, so we'll do that process between now and Monday night with the community agencies. But this is, do y'all have any questions on our breakout, the way we looked at it? And what we're trying to do is figure out how we can communicate what is the city doing for homelessness, right? That's one of the issues we want to, for that initiative, for that discussion. What are you already doing? What do you want to add to that pot?
Earl, I really like what's been done here by you and your staff a lot. 2 questions, since we have department heads here and the full commission. First of all, mend the line, is that something that we actually are doing through our HR department? Is that something?
I
that we
believe.
really ought to consider
Yeah,
just,
and Randy can talk about it at length. I believe it is. We do have an EAP program, but I don't, there's some preventative care that they're talking about wanting to have. I don't know. I mean,
I can expand on that. We actually met with them online, we kind of talked about the new initiatives early this year. They are doing some things that are unique. We have our EAP program, but one of the things we had talked about is like either having an on-site counselor for trauma events, like police and fire. We don't have that in terms of our EAPs. It's not designed for that, per se, like immediate trauma or for like ongoing treatment. And in the lines come up with a niche where they want to, what they're asking for is to help first responders through, funding to do that stuff that we talked about covering internally through like in-house counselors. So it's not only just, this is to be for all first responders. That's kind of the difference between that.
sure. Well, I'm not asking you to do it, but it just seems as though I wanted to ask if there was something that we're already paying for that provides a similar service.
Not only that, that's really something that we are lacking on, but they have stepped up to the plate and said they can provide a community service, something that they can provide, not just for the city, but for the whole.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? Last year in the budget, the commission approved $3,000 to Full Circle Behavioral Health. Did they ever, I mean, I would like to know, did the departments use it? Because that came to us as the same thing, I guess. And I don't know if it was ever utilized or if they got the money. I don't know. I don't even know if they're still here.
They requested their funds, I don't know
Okay,
if
right.
staff or anybody ever utilized their services.
Not to my knowledge, some of the, confidential stuff.
Yeah, but they came here on that same notion. That's what they were doing. And so it would be interesting for me to know. I mean,
Second question for me, and I think I already planted that seed with you earlier, going to make it the call. It almost seems to me like the Civil Air Patrol ought to be under Airport Board, and unless there's some reasons not to. I'm just kind of curious. Seems
Yeah, I
like
don't-
they had admin.
Went into that discussion.
Okay. It seems like, yeah, it just seems like that would be the umbrella organization.
So we will assemble that spreadsheet, get it to you today, and then if you'll be kind enough to fill it out, love to have it this week, but by Monday morning, in time for us to assemble a slide for the commission meeting, we'll try to conclude the conversation that evening.
I was gonna ask one more question on the Danville Small Town Christmas. You said last year we didn't fund them, I think we did, it just wasn't in the budget process, right? Didn't we give them some?
They came mid-year, remember?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we didn't fund them directly last year. We gave them in-kind services and, for like city staff services heavily on Melanie, and I think we did a few tents and things of that nature. So we
Okay.
didn't actually give them any physical funds.
Okay, thank you.
He's on a roll. isn't he? Other questions about community agency funding? Okay, move along.
I was just gonna say, before he gets into the detail, you do have it's a front little packet of the detailed departmental requests for the current fiscal year. And then you also, we'll talk a bit about it, have a summary of a 10-year, because staff works on a 10-year capital funding, just dollar amount, just for discussion in a bit. But you do have, as they go through their individual departments, you do have the individual list for capital.
And the goal of that 10 years is just to really look at what your demand for capital investment looks like. So now, if you'll remember, we did the strategic work plan last year with KLC. Melanie really envisioned this and did a terrific job. I'll give her credit for coming up with this graphic of these emblems and the descriptions tied to each emblem. So one of the things, for example, that was discussed was public safety. And so with that shield, we've got the police and fire protection, dispatch, security, and safe streets, right? Parks and Rec, if you read those descriptions. So the strategic items that was in the work plan, we've broken that into these categories, okay? And the goal with these categories is to illustrate, as we get into the capital discussion, what our perception is when we're talking about a capital project, which one of these categories that it impacts, if that makes sense. So we'll get into that. Also, down at the bottom left is the results of the budget survey. So we gave that to you again, simplified down into those 5 priority topics. Police, fire, public safety is first, water and sewer second. Well, water second, garbage and recycling is third, sewer's fourth, and then street maintenance is fifth. So you can really see how the public's perception of our priorities should be. So now, what we want to do, what we did was we took this and converted it into these things on the screen here that are tied to capital. And so what I wanted the department heads to do is to take a minute to talk about their capital, to remind you kind of, because we need to go from here with the capital and decide how we address the capital needs of each department. So we want them to talk about and remind you what their capital requests are. And then we want to do things like ask you all, do you all think we need to borrow money to fund some of it? Do you think only what we can afford in the reserves? How do you want to approach capital in the fiscal year we're going into? So I'm going to ultimately need some verbalization of direction on that topic, okay? Josh, you want to talk about your capital real quick?
So we can run down this list pretty quick. The first item is just a new trailer for the cemetery, I believe. Is there, or we have a separate trailer in cemetery? Is there a second one? Okay, so this one would just be for public works. I knew we had a trailer in cemetery. So this is, we're probably going to add trailers to almost every year, at least one, because we run through them pretty quickly, just with the amount of work we put into those. We were hauling our equipment around every day, so trailers are going to be a pretty common thing for us to need to replace. So that's a $10,000 item. The Walnut Complete Street Design. So this is a Trails Alliance ask. The last we had a Trails Alliance meeting before the last Parks Capital meeting, and one of the items they talked about wanting to get funded was put a little more effort into Walnut Street and how we're going to accommodate bicycles on Walnut Street. So. Lee and I were talking about this item. You can see, priority, Lee was giving me a hard time because everything's moderate or high. And I told her if it was low, I wouldn't have put it on here. But there is some thought put into the moderate and high that you see on there. The moderate items are the wants, and the high items, I think, are the needs when we talk about. So I'll kind of get into that more as we go through these lists. But like the Walnut Street design, that's something we could pull in-house, maybe lower the budget on. That's a very flexible item that we can kind of talk through. And it's something that the Trails Alliance would like us to do, but I think we could, $25,000 is probably on the high end of what we would spend there. We could try to bring that item down a little bit. Miscellaneous equipment. Rick and I were talking about this yesterday, Rick Henry, the Public Works Director, that's just items. Throughout the year, they'll have things break and things that need to be replaced and things that are aging out. A couple things we talked about just for this $35,000 is they would like to get a new lift for the mechanic. They would like to get a new curb painter. We're way behind on painting our curbs because we don't do our summer crew anymore that kind of faded away through COVID. So we were looking at buying a curb painting machine so we could send one person out to do that quickly instead of having to rely on a large crew. So there's items like that fit into that $35,000. Like I said, that number could move up and down, and we will get what we can get within the budget that we are allotted. Sidewalk repairs, this is I felt like was one of our priorities moving into this year, to start making more repairs around the community on our sidewalks. So we've budgeted $50,000 that would go towards, contracting that work out. Once again, that is, we will do as much sidewalk as we can with the money we're allotted. 50,000 is kind of a starting goal, but if it's less to fit in the budget, I think we could make that work. And then a mini excavator, we need a new mini excavator down there at Public Works, would be a $78,000 item, and that is listed as moderate as well. Kind of moving to the high items, the welcome signs. This was actually an item that was budgeted last year, so we kind of struggled to get the RFP out for. That RFP had been advertised and is on the street right now. We're anticipating getting proposals back on those signs in June. I think what we could look at there is as we look into next year's budget and we see what we can budget for, that at 200,000, we didn't put a number in the RFP when we sent this out to folks. We said, hey, you bring a price back to us and a design, and we will judge those separately and award that as a design build. So if we need to lower our budget from 200,000, we could. From the discussions I've had, 200,000 is a pretty good number. I thought, that felt high to us, but as I talked to sign companies, that's probably where we need to try to keep it if we want a quality product at the end.
How many signs are they?
That's for all 7 signs, all 7 welcome signs. A high priority item for public services is a new dump truck with a salt box and snowplow. And it's a high dollar item as well, $232,000. That's based on when we've just purchased about a year and a half ago. We purchased one, I think, previously. So that's a high priority for them. They need another dump truck. Those are getting, I think it's replacing maybe a 99 model or something like that. They're getting up in age. And then the last 2 items are grant related. The Boffman Avenue sidewalk project, we'll budget $500,000. We're expecting to start construction on that late 2024, early 2025. But there'll be a $400,000 reimbursement for that $500,000 from the state with the TAP grant. And then the last item, the North Stewart Lane extension, that $2.5 million is a very, very high-end number. We could spend as low as $250,000, $500,000 on that and within the next year. So I think that's a number that can be moved with the budget. Lee and I, we've discussed that as well. We actually sent that $2.5 million number in back when we weren't sure if we needed to finish the full $4.5 million proposed project back when the application was sent in. But we found out since then we don't have to rush that. We can kind of ease into that full project delivery. So we probably won't need to spend I don't think we can spend $2.5 million this year on that project. So that number can be reduced drastically as well. So as you can see with the public services side, I think is that all I've got? And then I've got stormwater. But as you can see from the public services side, the general fund side here, we've kept that pretty trimmed down as much as we can. Really items that we need that are grant funded or equipment that are breaking down or projects we've already started like the welcome signs. But there is a little room to reduce some of those budget numbers if we need to. Any questions on public services? And I'll go to stormwater next.
Does everyone understand the emblems and why we did that? I think that's a good illustration of how they apply.
Stormwater fund, pretty simple, straightforward. We'll start an assessment this upcoming fiscal year on Subbasin S, which is on the south side of town. It'd be the southwest quadrant, kind of down past between the creek and the bypass. That's next on our list of priorities to do an assessment on, and then we will have capital projects in Subbasin F, which is the assessment we're finishing up right now. I should have that report here in the next few weeks, which is kind of the north side of town out towards Streamland, which is the Twin Brook Culvert, and those kind of projects will fit into that $1 million. So we'll do a bond. We were proposing a bond issuance for that, and that the stormwater rate increase that we've discussed will cover that bond debt payment that we'll have afterwards. So that's it for stormwater for capital. Cemetery. Another trailer in the cemetery as we have to take our equipment each day back and forth to each cemetery to do our burials. And then this, we need to have a workshop with the cemetery committee to talk about priorities. We've discussed that. One of the items for me that I felt kind of raised to the top of the list after we've pushed the shelters down the road a little bit is the front fence at Hilldale along Duncan Hill Road. It's a chain link fence. It's got a lot of damage that happens to it over time. It's starting to show some age. I think it'd be really good to replace that fence with a black aluminum fence like we put up in the front of Bellevue Cemetery. We've put a number in there, 100,000. It's a moderate. We can have a conversation about that as well if we want to do the project. If we want to reduce the scope, we could do half fence one year, half fence next if we wanted to reduce that amount. But it's something we can also discuss at that cemetery workshop if as we plan that here over the next month or two. And that's it for cemetery for next year. And then, all right, I'll maybe get Tommy involved in this next one a little bit. So Parks and Rec. So after we had our Parks and Rec joint capital meeting with the county, I got to dig into this early. Let me go into the full proposal that we talked about.
Describe it, yeah.
So we saw the couple priorities. The main one being the Bunny Davis pool renovation. We felt like that was really a priority for both entities. So we've placed that in here at the bottom of the list as a $3 million proposed cost. And we would fund that with a bond issuance. We would hopefully be able to share that with the county. They would be involved in that project as well. So we saw that as kind of one option. And then the other option, we heard a lot of smaller projects. We wanted to do a lot of smaller projects spread throughout Danville, throughout the county, even other communities. So we came up with a list of projects that totaled up to another $3 million. The ones I have listed on here are the ones that we felt like were a benefit to the city of Danville. There's a couple other projects in Perryville and Junction that could be included in that as well if the county is involved, and we talk about sharing costs on a lot of these projects. But you can see here, there's a full list there that we would like to, if we want to go ahead and if we want to borrow $6 million instead of $3 million, we could do the pool renovation and do this menu of projects throughout the community. And there's some that would be, we feel like are kind of city Danville projects, such as like the Jackson Park court improvements. That would be a city project. But a lot of these could also be ones that we share with the county, such as anything in Millennium Park that we do. The Alum Springs Mountain Bike Park could be a joint project. So that kind of gives you a list there. We kind of see this as, and if I've got some high projects listed as high priority on there, those are the projects where if this all falls apart and we don't do a big bond issuance and do a $6 million, park capital endeavor, that's still projects that we need to do, like Jenny Rogers gym bleachers. Like we need to put new bleachers at Jenny Rogers. That's inside the gym. New playground at Jenny Rogers. We need to put a new playground in the backyard, and that would kind of finish Jenny Rogers. So I think I've listed some of those as high that we would like to discuss further if we don't do a big capital project. But this kind of gives you all the list that Tommy and I have talked about this, and we've talked to our consultant about that. Really, we felt like addressed a lot of the concerns that were discussed in that joint meeting. But we're flexible at this point to kind of move these around, move costs around, because these are other than the Bunny Davis pool, a lot of these other estimates are just kind of round numbers that we've put towards them. And also, the amount of money we put towards it determines the scale of the project. We could scale something down, do something a little smaller, a little more affordable. But we feel like this will get us a good product at each location that was discussed during the joint meeting. So there's probably a lot more questions about this slide than the other ones.
Lead, is new debt service in here, if we bond or anything?
It is not included in your revenue. We didn't include any current capital numbers or current capital financing numbers.
Okay, that's
So
what I thought.
in your big packets, that's just to operate, to keep the city, to keep it going, right? So any advisor to kind of get some very tentative, because interest rates change all the time, funding numbers for a potential $6 million and potential $3 million bond issuance. And you're looking for a 25-year bond issuance at $6 million, you're looking at about $450,000 potentially to be split between ideally the city and the county if that worked out, or a $3 million at about $220,000 annually in debt service. Also, if that potentially could be split, but that's all highly contingent upon things that are unknown at this point. So those numbers could fluctuate significantly.
Sure.
Depending on where interest runs.
The catch with that debt service is you won't see the debt service till the next fiscal year, right? So that's really irrelevant for this specific budget, but it is something that Lee and I need to program into our projections going forward, right? So again, just to reiterate that, I'm trying to, I've told some of the department heads or all of them this, you know, Lee's done a good job assembling the numbers. We've heard what their lists are. We need to hear your feedback against that list to give us a little bit of direction on what we need to, and I'm trying to be that, you know, judging what each of you are saying so that we get to a point where we think everybody can agree on a proposed approach to the budget, right? So,
My whole issue with forever has been, I don't know what they need, and I've never known
Right.
them to ask for a great deal of anything they don't need. So
Correct.
it's, I'm not sure
so.
what our input's gonna be, or mine personally, anyway.
Well, you know, like, so to do the Bunny Davis pool, we're probably gonna have to borrow money. So are y'all gonna be inclined for Lee and I to program bond money into the
Okay.
budget? If not, then, and you all say, well, we're not really into borrowing money right now. Let's continue to develop the idea and see what that looks like, or have additional conversations with the county, you know, which we know we have to have a follow-up workshop in the short term anyway. But, you know, you can also say, well, let's just see what we can fund out of the reserves, Earl. Come back and tell us that. And so we'll analyze it with that in mind and try to see what that looks like. We'll continue to add that we pulled down the reserves last year over the last 3 years, like we had talked about. That was very intentional, right? So we pulled those back down to a number that we're more accustomed to having in terms of percentage of the operating budget in reserve, right? So.
And a part of my issue with the bonding is that if we were gonna bond for the Bunny Davis pool, I'd want maybe to include the bonding for the project you're gonna convince me of at Jenny Rogers involving the pool. So we have a two-faceted approach. It increases the bonding tremendously.
That is an option.
You saying, Mike?
If we looked at bonding the Bunny Davis pool, if we had at the same time the bonding for the proposed Jenny Rogers
Oh,
pool,
okay. I got you.
if it ever got decided as a location, it'd be neat to do the two of it at the same time, because you want to have one up and running as you begin the construction and renovation of the second one, as an example.
And and just to let you all know, we've kind of talked through a timeline on Bunny Davis of, if you all told us today, we want to do this, we would get our consultant started on a design and try to start construction on that this late fall into winter. Really hit the ground hard running in the spring. We will probably be down a pool next summer, but then we'll be ready to open late 2025, I guess that would be. We'd be ready to open the pool. And that $3 million includes a cover, so we could open it in November, if that's when we finished. We could go ahead and have a grand opening with it, so.
We've said this every year on the pool. I'm going to jump in here and say this. I've been under the pool in the pump room myself and worked on pumps, and I think Marshall and Tommy was in there this week, and they were kind of laughing at the engineering that we were able to pull off a little bit. I know Tommy was. And give credit to Andy and those guys, everybody involved, for keeping it running. All the guys at Parks and Rec over the last few years, there's been a lot of work done. And Carl Harmon, you know, was in there a lot. That thing's not going to keep running. Let me be totally clear. And it could just be, with the amount of water that we're losing out of the side, this could be the last summer for it, to be honest with you. We've talked about that running into the ground. We've spent a lot of money a year. It feels like it's approaching the end. I'm just going to be totally, that's my observation, having walked in there now again for another year. It's losing a lot of water again.
I had a Josh question. So it includes seasonal cover, and it includes renovations. What about the adding a lane or two idea? Was that included?
We haven't talked through that yet on this. Our intent there to keep the cost down was just to reuse the same hole that's
Okay.
there, which if we widen that, but we can have that conversation as we move. If we move forward with the design, I can say, hey, give us a cost difference to add 2 lanes, and we
Well,
can come back.
The
and-
cost is very, very good compared to what we've seen, 10, 20, 30 million for other pools. And everything I've heard from my constituents says, let's go for it. So I don't know what you guys have heard, but very positive, and I think it's a good price for what can be done there.
Well, we've talked internally about it a lot, like, Tommy and I, and we talked about this at the joint meeting, it's not gonna get cheaper. Like, if we wait a year, the price isn't going down. So, we are pouring a lot of money and time into the pool. It is like, Tommy got introduced to the pool this week officially. Like, we filled it with water, we started turning pumps on, and he got officially introduced, and he's realizing that the work that has to go into that pool every year just to keep us open. So, the law, there's not a real good reason to wait, other than just, do we want to spend the money, other than the money, and Lee can, it's a good reason, but that's the only reason. Otherwise, it needs done. If we're going to keep a pool there, if the community wants a pool there, the project needs done. It just does.
Me personally, sorry, Mayor. I would also like to, I know I keep harping on it, but if we're gonna do this, I think you have to talk to the county, to
Yeah.
say, they're supposed to be part of that. It's not all on the city's shoulders, it
And
shouldn't be.
we put that, we include that, like, we need to have a conversation with them and come up with an
Right,
agreement
because we
to.
said, go ahead and do it, which obviously something's gotta be done.
Yeah.
But you can't just go, oh, we're gonna do it, and then hope that they're gonna jump in on ship. You gotta sort of plan that ahead of time, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to get your feedback before we had a big public conversation with everybody involved. If there was no temperament from you guys as we report to you. So if there's something that you all just don't want to do, then there's no point in us trying to urge other things forward. So we'll have that follow-up workshop and have that good, healthy discussion, but it will be around these items that are on the screen.
But for this cost estimate, it's just about the pool renovation. See, the other piece to me at the Bunny Davis site is when the pool gets done, everything else needs to be refurbished at the same time. I wrote down pickleball courts, expansion, or whatever, and I talked about, is that gonna be the permanent site for the rec department's, office in the long run? There are a lot of little questions, which I don't mind getting into them, because if we're moving close to doing this for quote-unquote indoor-outdoor pool location, then let's do that site appropriately, so we won't have to go back to the table with that site 3 or 4 years ago, and then we can focus on, I always said the second location, the other location.
We've had a lot of discussions lately. Ash and Red, and we've had a lot of discussions lately with the Danville Picklers about where they'd like to see their final home at. Buddy Davis is still an option. We're looking at some other places. We're going to develop some concepts and get some pricing and talk to them about that, and talk to you all about it as well, and the county, because that's probably going to be one we ask to share as well. If Bunny Davis is the home for that, that's the tricky part. That needs to happen after the pool, because we need to access the pool from a construction standpoint, where the existing pickleball courts are now. So we need to get the pool done and then come back in after and do new pickleball courts, if that's where it ends up. So all of that, it's still a little too fluid to pin down completely, but it's something we're thinking about, especially with pickleball, how we expand that and where that ends up at.
Pickleball is not like some of the other sports that are more traditional in that it's new. And they're still trying to gel around what can they, as a community, those people that play pickleball, what site can they rally around, or what concept can they really build sport within the pickleball community, within the picklers, as they call themselves. And, you know, we did have, Mayor, to your point, we did have a good conversation with Tommy, and we've challenged Tommy as staff, now that he's here and getting his feet wet at the pool, to figure out, really go through the exercise of figuring out what needs to be, what activities does the city and county need to have, need to offer as a service out of that facility? I mean, like, what really are they?
Yeah.
And we don't want duplicate services just so the city can say, well, we have it, when there's 3 other people that do that. Like, that doesn't do a great service to the community. So we want things that are not provided, perhaps, or even. And so Tommy's going to work through that a little bit, using the Parks and Rec master plan that's on file, and peel out of that. And so unless you want to say something, Tommy, I mean, I think that's your marching orders. And so we'll continue to work through that and have more dialogue at a workshop with the county, hopefully in the next couple of weeks.
So clarifying, these numbers are without Boyle County Physical Court input?
Yeah, that's the project costs.
Yeah.
Right. This is
And-
not how you pay for them. This is what the projects that are on the screen, what he thinks they'll cost.
I just want to clarify it for everybody in the public, especially the other thing is, there was no mention, although the mayor just brought it up with pickleball expansion, but also I think ranked pretty high was the indoor facility. So is that just set off to the side?
Well, you know, these are just FY '25, and that's we first did this, we looked at the pickleball courts being in Bunny Davis. So that would be pushed to FY '26 because it has to happen after the pool is done. So it's in the 10-year plan being in FY '26, the pickleball expansion would be. If we change locations, maybe we can move that up into FY '25 and start it sooner.
On the indoor, let me say this, there are many specific examples. A lot of times what those indoor facilities are, they're a shared resource. Someone else in the community and someone else in the community are paying for that together. You can go to Taylor County, the schools and the community paid for that facility together. You can go to Northern Kentucky and find one where the hospital and the city paid for it with no county involvement. You can go to another location where it was the city and the county that did it exclusively. Grant funded in Muhlenberg County, is that right? And so, and that's county and city owned, or just county owned?
It's a joint school,
Yeah. So,
county, and grant.
yeah, so there's an sundry of ways that indoor facility. So what we're trying to do is effort that conversation with potential partners to see what that would look like and see what that highest best use of that asset would be. And then that is something that we have to do as staff, and we've got to bring back to you as a future idea or something vetted. That's not fully vetted yet, but the conversation is trying to happen amongst administrators.
Yeah, we've had some meetings, we're having some discussions, we're not ready to spend money on it yet as far as do a feasibility study or that kind of thing. We may come back in 6 months to a year and say, hey, it's changed, or we're going this direction and we need to fund this. But right now, we're just not ready to have anything to spend money on that we can identify.
On the Parks and Rec fund, are these items, like, these are the department heads' items, wish list or whatever. So is this the wish list from Tommy and you combined?
Yeah, we work
That's
together
what
on
you
it.
all came up with?
Yep.
Because I was, oh, okay,
In the
It
committee,
directly came from that joint meeting.
okay,
We kind of pivoted to
okay,
what you guys kind of said.
all right.
and Tommy, the committee has seen these priorities too, right? The committee has seen these things.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And what was great was the park committee wishes mirrored what you guys were.
Okay.
We all seem to be on the same page.
Nobody has any money to give this though.
The Michael Smith Park Pavilion, what is that?
So that was kind of the next phase there, Michael Smith Park, was, we get the playground and the splash pad done. When we did public outreach down there 2 years ago or so, the big thing we heard was they wanted a nice pavilion. The community down there wants a nice pavilion to host, church gatherings and family reunions and those kind of things. So I feel like that's the one piece Earl and I were talking about, like, it's the one piece that's missing for that park feeling, to me, after going through the process with the public, is complete. There's other things we can add later, but if it's be complete, it needs a nice pavilion. So that's-
Complete's a stopping point, so nothing, you never stop
No.
spending money on things, you know, you maintain them forever. But to get that park, I say it like this, to a stopping point where you're not gonna spend any more money down there in the next 5 years or whatever time period, you're probably gonna wanna add that pavilion, and then you're probably at a stopping point where you can leave that park alone for 8 or 10 years.
And I think that's gonna be even more of a need once we open the new playground splash pad. I think it's gonna be, I mean, we were down there today with our progress meeting, and we're so excited about it. It's very, very nice, and it's gonna be busy. It's gonna be really busy down there.
Yeah, you're gonna be impressed by that. They did a good job with the design. And keep in mind too, one of your community agencies wanted, they had their community service that that they perform is providing handicap playgrounds and accessible facilities. When the neighboring community started their accessible playground, the city of Danville didn't have any. Well, now we have at least one, and at the conclusion of this project, we'll have 2 facilities that are accessible that we didn't have so keep that in mind. We have facilities that are accessible that were not accessible even 5 years ago. That we have one facility at Millennium Park, and then we'll have another one down here at Michael Smith Park.
And I didn't add too on the Quail Farm Trail improvements, which is the trail out by, off Lebanon Road near Corporate Drive that we have Class I sand out on that we need to pave. And then the woven wire improvements in Trailhead, those were also to Trails Alliance group. That was 2 of their requests as well. If we're gonna invest money this year, those are areas. Now, I've got those listed as high and moderate, Quail Farm high because we need to pave that trail or we're just gonna keep pouring more time and money into it because we're having some washout issues with it. So it's for me, it's high. That's work we need to do, or we're gonna spend more money than necessary. The woven wire trail improvements, that's a moderate because that could move down the road a little bit. But that group is really wanting to see a new trailhead built. And the Industrial Foundation is working with us and the EDA to turn some property over for maybe put a trailhead there off of Enterprise Drive. So that's something that's kind of ongoing that it's a good project that the community is really looking forward to. So those are kind of the 2 on there that aren't real clear. And then if the Norfolk Southern property, we close on it with the EDA, there's some potential expansion opportunity there for woven wire, to take it from a 2-mile loop to more like a 4-mile loop, which is really a big game changer for mountain bikers. 2 miles isn't much, but 4 miles really gets it to something they could use. So yeah, that's, any other questions on the parks?
Who's next, Josh? Marshall.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Josh.
And before Marshall gets started, he'll walk you through it, but you do have a secondary handout to go with his slides that is labeled, Utilities Capital. That kind of, because Marshall's funding sources are varied, and you have that large printout, that he's provided, as well, that covers some information about the projects, because Marshall's funding sources vary more than the others.
Yeah, so I passed out some additional information on the Excel sheet there. It has some colors out to the right. There's several different funding sources, so I wanted to kind of make it a little bit more visual for everybody to see. That way the costs extend from lowest to highest, but when you do that and you throw in the mix multiple funding sources, it gets a little complicated as to what's being funded out of what pot. So when I broke it into colors for you guys, each color kind of represents its own fund, whether it's ARPA funds, city utility funds, bonds, and so on and so forth. So it makes a little more visual sense to you. It's easier, a little bit easier to follow along too. And then further to the right are two colors, green and blue. Obviously, green is sewer and blue is water. So it kind of makes it a little bit more, stands out to you the balance of the projects overall. Otherwise, it's just a whole lot of numbers together, and it's hard to keep up with things, or at least it was for me, so. So we'll just go through these real fast, or not real fast, I'm sorry. We'll go through them very thoroughly. Starting with the SCADA system for our sewer pump station. So what is the SCADA system? That's essentially a system that we have it already at the water plant where we can monitor chemical dosages and so on and so forth at the water plant and monitor, the amount of water coming in and coming out and those type of things. Well, if we can apply that to our various pump stations around town for sewer, then it's like you've heard me talk about before at the wastewater plant, the new wastewater plant, they can monitor those on the screen as opposed to having to send our sewer collections folks having to send multiple people out in the field every single day to check those. That's multiple hours out of a day that they could be doing other things, whereas we could consolidate that into one computer screen in the new wastewater plant. So that's what that is. The next one is our emergency backups for a lot of our sewer pump stations. So it's not uncommon that in the middle of the night, we may have a backup pump go out on one of our pump stations. And when that happens, it's a critical issue for us because we don't want that pump station to overflow and create violation issues with divisional water and so on. So this is just us trying to stockpile some additional pumps for emergency purposes and then replacing any of the older ones that are reaching the end of their useful life. Dump truck for sewer collections. That's a $40,000 value, and I placed it at $40,000 simply because we've shopped around at times, and there's used dump trucks out there on the market for a third of the cost of what a new one is. So we successfully bought one for water distribution a couple months ago when it was $30,000 to $40,000. So I think we can do that with sewer crews as well, as opposed to a $120,000 new dump truck, if that makes sense. There's still good equipment out there that's used as long as it just depends on what it was used for. If it was used for hauling salt, that might be another discussion that we wouldn't want to have that. So, but if they're in good shape, then it's certainly worth exploring on the cost side. That next one is a total organic compound analyzer that's at the water plant. That's a special apparatus for calibration and monitoring our total organic compounds from raw water that comes into the system. And then the next one is a new Myox water chlorinator. So if you think of what's a Myox chlorinator, that's essentially taking salt to convert into chlorine to treat the water as it goes out into the system. And the chlorine's for maintaining water quality throughout the system. So you have to maintain a residual chlorine level all the way out in the very tips of your system. And to do that, you have to have a machine that can convert the salt into chlorine. So that's what that is. It operates like a saltwater pool. It's the same thing, if that makes any sense. Next one is Mox Creek Pump Station. This is a critical pump station in our system. This serves Bergen Road all the way up into Bergen. It serves North Point Training Center. So it gets a lot of effluent on a daily basis. And it's highly corrosive, that effluent that comes into the system, simply because it stays in the lines coming into the pump station for such a long time. We need to rehab that pump station because it's one of our critical ones. Danville lead and copper rule. So you'll see multiples of these throughout the next couple slides. Under loan, you've heard me talk previously about a lot of the KIA and SRF money that we were successfully able to garner for the city. So we kind of got out ahead of that with KIA and SRF, and we've been successful in getting that money. And we have to have that early in the process of the lead and copper recommendation. So by October of this year, you'll hear me talk extensively about lead and copper requirements and reaching out to the public. And we've got an RFQ that's going out
I think next week, timing-wise, to bring some folks in and help us with that programmatically overall, because there's a huge communication effort with that. And reaching out to disadvantaged areas of the city, schools and daycares, and so like there's a really big communications component to that too. So, and they're in different values at different times, because when the discussions came up for lead and copper with KIA and SRF and EPA and all these entities, we actually reached out early on and got our interest addressed in other fiscal years. So fiscal year '23 money is just now becoming available in fiscal '24 and '25. Does that make sense? So we've got multiple projects, but we went back and laid out multiple projects in upcoming fiscal years, and they're starting to show themselves, if that makes sense. So that's one of those, and that's listed as high, obviously. Kind of like Josh, I could have listed all these as high, but it is what it is. Rotting machine for utilities. This is a critical piece of equipment for our folks in sewer collections. If we have a backup in a critical sewer line, you know, sometimes it does happen. Sometimes you get grease in the sewer lines and so on. This is a critical machine to get that broken back up and free flowing again. That's a pretty dated piece of machine right there that we've had for many years. And if it goes down, our only option is to go out and buy a brand new one if it's even available, which is really hard to come by, or you go to try to rent one, which you end up paying long-term until you can find another one. So trying to be proactive and getting that replaced for our folks in the field. Water meter replacement. So this is including some aging technology that's, you know, essentially getting to the point of the end of their useful life, as far as when the city back, I guess it was early 2000s, went through the process of updating the meters out in the field, right? So there's batteries in those meters. They have about a 20-year lifespan on those batteries, and we're starting to see some of those start to fail in those areas. And when they do, we go back and replace them with a new one. But you've got a lot of meters that are on the same time schedule, so you're starting to see some of them start to fail more often. And if that's the case, as opposed to piecemealing that together, maybe it's best to go out and replace large chunks of those at a time, right? And it makes it more energy efficient or water efficient for the customers, and allows them to stay more in the know with their accounts and so on and so forth, and maintain water quality too. So that's what that's geared towards. And then US 150 pump station down there at the bottom. This is kind of tied to the McKinney discussion. I'll talk about that in a few minutes, but this is essentially a new pump station near the end of Airport Road to allow better water capacity and provision along the US 150 corridor, even into Stanford, but also to help serve the McKinney Water District in the future. In recent years, they've had some issues with maintaining water pressures, which gives you issues with water quality and capacity issues too in their system. So this is essentially a partnership with McKinney, and I'll talk a little bit more in depth about that. But this is the pump station on our end that we would need to be able to push that water all the way into McKinney, if that makes sense. And we'll also use it to serve, again, the 150 corridor and any water demand needs that we have in that side of the city, on the east side. And then the next slide. These are multiple, I call these multiple small water line projects simply because they were similar in size and scope. And if you've got a couple, 3 to 4 projects that are similar in size and scope and aren't, you know, progressively expensive on the high end, then maybe you can lump those into one contract and get a little bit better price for the install and price on materials. And it makes it more efficient for the contractor to be working in multiple places at once, as opposed to just hopping around multiple contractors in different parts of the city. But those are going to be critical for water quality and just provision of capacity also, and also redundancy in our system. It's good to loop areas of our water system with a connector line, because now you can feed, redundantly in that process. as opposed to having a main break here, and then it causes issues for the next quarter mile of water main, so. And then, the next one is GAC replacement. So you've heard me multiple times come to the commission to discuss the GAC, granular activated carbon reactivation or replacement. We got multiple filters at the water plant that's got carbon inside of it. And that's essentially the primary way that we filter our water before it goes out into the system. And it's proven to be a very, very efficient way to do that. So, but the only drawback to that is it can be costly annually because it has to be removed at certain points when it doesn't reach its most efficient capabilities. You have to take that carbon out, burn off the excess poor organic material out of it, and then replace it back into the system. And there's a process for that and people that have to do that, that are qualified to do that. So it works very well, but it also, another thing too is you've heard me talk about PFAS over the years. And you hear that's more of a national conversation now. Well, based on the efforts by, Earl and the guys at the water plant and other folks that from a funding agency standpoint and regulatory agency, we're actually in great position to have those conversations because, we've tested our water that's leaving the plant and it's a zero for those type of critical chemicals that's going out into our system, which is good. We're way ahead of the game. So, and if you go through the checklist of the whole PFAS discussion and US EPA and Division of Water, and they say, well, what are good ways to administer that and address, any kind of chemical issues that may be in your system? One of the first ones that they check off is a GAC system, and we've got it. So just want to be, clear with you all on that too, that we're in a great place to do that. And the next one is Balls Branch Sewer North Phase 1 and 2. This is a project that I'm planning to finalize some legal agreements and getting that out on the street probably as early as next week. This is Phase 1 and 2. I want to go ahead and, like I said earlier, put those into the same contract and hopefully get a better cost on the labor and install of that same sewer line. But this feeds all the way up into the center, the bypass center area there behind what's out there, Wings and Rings, Cattleman's, that whole development area. So it's going to be fed from Ghost Pike all the way up into the back end of that, and then the developer will build from there all the way through their development. So the next one, lead and copper rule compliance. Again, that's one of those lead and copper KIA projects. I have some better descriptors there on the right in case you wanted to read through them, but it's all lead and copper regulatory driven, and getting the inventories and assets done by the end of this year also. But I say the end of this year, that's just the beginning of the conversation, is getting your inventory. Once you have your inventory, this is a multi-year process until you get all of the lead and copper service lines out of your system, period. So you can imagine that it's going to take a long time to do that, but we feel like we can do it certainly with availability of funds that we have. And if we need additional funds in the future, we'll work to get those too. So, McKinney Waterline Project, this was the discussion I had earlier on the 150 pump station. This is to provide capacity to the McKinney system, but also along the US 150 corridor. Installation of approximately 8,000 linear feet of 8-inch water line and appurtenances. So, part of that is going to be Danville's commitment. Approximately $500,000 is Danville's commitment to building a portion of that from Airport Road to approximately Kentucky 300. And then from there on out will be a loan to McKinney to help facilitate some additional funding needs they need on their end to supplement some additional funds they have from Lincoln County Fiscal Court. So working as, it's essentially a wholesale partnership. So once we get all that put in, there will be a new wholesale customer for City of Danville. 2168 bypass, this is the project you've heard me talk about. This is a pretty lengthy project, about 16,000 linear feet, a new 12-inch water main along 2168 on the north side of town. This is to improve water capacity and system redundancy and provide for future economic development. Right now, there's no water or sewer along that corridor at all. So step one is getting water out there, and that makes it a lot more attractive for development, housing industry, and so on and so forth, and gives those property owners a little more ability to facilitate those conversations in cooperation with the city. And if you remember, that one was tied to the cleaner water grant that we had, $959,000 grant that we got for that one too, to help supplement costs on that. Junction City and Perryville Sewer System. So this is the Boyle County ARPA discussion that we've talked about before. So in the ARPA discussion, the city got an apportionment, and so did the county fiscal courts across the state got an apportionment. So we worked with, and Earl was key in those conversations of working with county judge at that time, as well as now Judge Bottom, but discussing best ways to use a portion of the county ARPA money to go towards critical sewer improvements for Junction City and Perryville. So by using that money, it negates the need for additional capital improvements in those systems and, debt service, so on and so forth. So it really helps you in that conversation. And these are pump stations that are notorious for not having enough capacity, overflows during wet weather periods. And then when you start to build in additional capacity into these pump stations, then they become more economically attractive. Does that make sense? So that's part of that discussion. So, and I'll say this too, we had, about a month ago, we put the RFQ out to the public, to some engineering firms for design, contractual oversight, and getting it to construction as well as construction. And we've had multiple firms reach out. We want to be real proactive in getting that information out because, it's always good to have as much competition in the room when you have those engineering discussions and you're looking to get contractual use out of that, right? We've had 6 firms that have responded back, and as of an hour ago, 5 of the 6 have brought their proposals by. So hopefully we've got one more still outstanding that may meet the deadline of close of business today. And then once we get that, we've invited some representatives from the fiscal court to sit in on a selection committee. And we'll go through a process of, going through and scoring those and getting a selected preferred at the time. Then you negotiate a contract with that firm at that time. But we set the cap at a total value of $2.8 million because that's how much money that the county had. So we were very upfront with those firms saying, this is a total budget. So if you're talking about engineering fees and oversight fees, you need to be able to do that, figure in construction, and come in under the cap. So that was part of that whole process. So you'll hear more about that in the coming months, but we're getting ready to kick that off. And then there's another lead and copper, which I mentioned earlier. Again, KIA and SRF money. And then Spears Creek Sewer Pump Station improvements. That's an ongoing project that we've already kicked off. We had a $400,000 STAG grant that we were awarded to go towards that. So that's actually already in construction, but it's going to be in, not at the end of this, it won't be completed by the end of this fiscal year. It'll be closer to the end of the next fiscal year. So that's why it's included in this conversation. And a lot of these, well, I probably need to stop and say something about some of these costs right here are broken out in multiple fiscal years. That's why some of them are actually representative of the coming fiscal year, and some of them are actually a third or a half of the coming fiscal year, simply because those construction projects take so much time, and also there's such a high dollar that it's better for the city, and I won't speak for Lee, but it's better for the city in finance to break those out into multiple fiscal years, obviously, instead of trying to roll those into one and see if you can get it all done when you can't.
That's why he did provide a breakout for the next 3 years, which should cover most of these projects unless something goes on, but that, just a year by year, most of the same projects carry all 3 years, and then a couple drop off in fiscal '26.
Yeah.
And he has provided you the total of each project here at the very edge of the column. but your budgeting, your appropriation has to be for fiscal year '25.
So, and then that leaves the last one, Clark's Run Trunk Sewer Line, Sewer Improvements Phase 2. This builds on the Phase 1 work that was done out Lebanon Road. This is essentially Phase 2 to carry it all the way to the east, to the lagoon in Michael Smith Park. So, or there along Woods Drive. Installation of 9,200 linear feet of large diameter sewer line along the Clark's Run. So that really has multiple facets to it. Replacing old sewer lines is one, because when we have, really high rainwater like we've had recently, you get a lot of what's called I&I, and that's stormwater, essentially, that gets into your sewer system, and it can overwhelm the wastewater plant, right? And then two, the larger diameter increases capacity, so now you get back to the whole capacity discussion that you heard me talk about before, and it makes the city more economically attractive, right, for housing or for industry and so on and so forth. So it's part of that discussion too. That one, of course, it has a large price tag of $7.6 million, but we also, that's the one that we had an EDA grant of $1.99 million that we were successful on too. So, and then we were successful in work with, I'll say this too, with working with KIA. Part of that was, initial discussions was, we weren't able to get the $5.6 million from KIA. It was just a portion of that. So we kept going back to KIA multiple times to say, well, because if you don't do that, you have to supplement that funding gap with local funds. Well, it was worth the effort to go back to KIA and keep saying, well, if there's anything available, you just let me know. Well, if there's anything available, let me know. And they finally conceded, and we were able to fund through KIA and negate having to put in another $2.5 or so million of local funds into that conversation. It's built in the KIA funds, so. And that's all I've got. I'll take any questions that you have.
That's exhausting. Let me
It
talk
is.
about
Sorry.
Marshall's operating budget a little bit. We are, the last rate study, I want to put this on your radar as Marshall and I continue to go through his budget and sort through operating expenses, and as we do a review of his revenue and look at his demand profile of water and see how that overlays against our billing to make sure we're collecting it at a correct rate and those things. I want to footnote, when you look at the water treatment plant operating expenses, for example, the last time when Connie did the last rate study, it was based on the cost pre-COVID, and which we've seen an increase in operating expenses at the plant of about, going from about $2 million and change to about $3 million and change. That is more than what that was projected when she did her rate study on the water rate at the time. We've changed billing. So we're looking through that demand, and we're also going to look at, to make sure the assumptions in our last rate study were accurate, given the impact on inflation to the operating expenses at the plant. And so what I'm saying that to say that the COLA on the water side, I would suggest when we look at his numbers, the sewer probably looks like it's break even, which is what it's supposed to be. We may need to do a minor adjustment on the water side after we get through the demand above the COLA slightly. And it would be a correction based on the inflation that is above what Connie predicted in the last rate study. And, nobody predicted it really. So we don't know that yet. We're looking at it, and we're going to see if there's an opportunity there, any expenses in the operating side to make that match. But anyway, I just want to give you all the heads up that we're still looking at the utility revenue side. You've got the numbers in front of you. You can go through it, but just know that, and we'll continue to have that dialogue, and we'll have that more developed by the time we get to another budget meeting for you. If you've seen some of the slides we've always done before, we've not done one yet because we're not done yet. But remember, we've always put the water demand up with the water revenue and the sewer demand up with the sewer revenue. And so, we'll do that again, just so you know, you anticipate that.
Anticipated increase?
I don't know yet. So the demand, it's like I was telling Lee, Lee was asking the question, well, it does not align with COLA, that your water system revenue doesn't align with what your COLA increase. So if you, just because you put a 7% COLA increase on, doesn't mean you're gonna get 7% more revenue. That's just a cooked-in amount you adjust for what the state predicted as your cost of inflation. That doesn't take into account an industry that cut its water consumption by 50%. So your water revenue is really tied to your demand profile, not necessarily what you are changing every year by percentage based on the COLA. And so we're gonna try to provide some analysis of that for you as we get further into his budget. By the next budget meeting in 2 weeks, we'll try to have a little bit of that information presented for you, just so we can confirm the direction. The trend line is a little different than with general fund taxes. And so we've worked through that with Marshall and Lee, and so they know, we're all on the same page. And so we'll put that slide together for you at the end in 2 weeks.
I just wanted to thank Marshall for the breakdown of these numbers, and color-coded. But it's really good to see what things are grants, what amount the grants are, when talking about so many $1 million. So just thank you for taking the time to divide all this up, with all those numbers, so.
And for going back and asking for more money.
Yeah. Yeah, they're tired of hearing from me, I'm sure.
That's why they give you money.
That's right.
They get tired of hearing from you, right? Good job. Any other questions for Marshall? I think we ought to take a 5-minute break, maybe for an hour and a half. You can keep on both sides of the lid.
I did.
Call ourselves back together. Thanks for your patience. Oh, get them here, go right. I think,
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. If we could get the chief to come on over and lead the conversation.
I didn't want to raise my voice to the chief.
I did.
He
I did.
packed
Sorry.
his seat too. Thank you, sir. You pack it, look, you always pack it, right? Okay, we're back, reconvened, and up next is our police chief, Chief Ray.
Here we go. Where to begin? So as far as, I guess, for capital requests and things here, you see, like, we have, it doesn't probably seem like much, but cell phone software, $5,000, and I've got that as a high request. More and more crimes are tied to cell phones. I mean, it's one of our biggest information gathering things, tools. And we've got to keep up with software and things like that with those instruments. More crimes are just tech, different things like that. And we just have to have that software for our investigators, for us to work around or depend on the state police or another agency to send a cell phone off and let them try to process it, then us process it. You're talking about months, maybe even years before we get that evidence back.
They're that busy, right?
Yeah, I mean, every drug investigation, and I mean, we take drugs off the street just about every single night. We're taking a cell phone, probably 80% of the time when it's involving any type of arrest or anything, or just in investigations. There's some people that, they don't have home phones and different things like that. Anything they do online is through their cell phone. So, I mean, it does, $5,000, but that's a major request that we need. We have $15,000 for equipment, asking for the general fund. I did that as moderate. A drone is moderate at $25,000. The mobile data computers and improvements to the range. So I've got those all at moderate, but I don't have to have them today. But I mean, we've got to start making some improvements. We've had the range on there for 2 or 3 years, I believe now. We've got to update that. As you all know, liability with the Kentucky League of Cities, for training purposes. Right now, our range is pretty much stationary. KLC wants there to be some kind of movement. We do 2 ranges a year, low light, or we do one in the fall for low light, what we call when the time changes, and we do one during the spring. We just did our spring range. But, we really don't have the electrical updates and things like that to do a properly low light range. We need to make improvements to that range house. I don't think, well, I've been here 29 years last month or this month, and we did a few concrete 2 or 3 years ago, but that's it. We've not made any improvements really back in there since then. As Nick testified to, our mobile data computers, those are in every police car, runs license plates, runs wanted persons, all those things. As Nick can tell you, we try to do 5 or 8, so if we don't do that 40,000 this year, then next year's probably gonna double. Sooner or later, we all know those computers, about 4 years, 3 or 4 years, updates, all those things, the police department renovation. it says high there, but, you know, we gotta have manpower too. You know, if you're asking me today, you know, what's more important to us? And, you know, some of you know that I've talked about retirement and Assistant Chief Donor and myself, you know, because these things affect, you know, them moving forward. You know, we've got to get back on top of staffing and personnel. He's already worked one day last week. He had to cover shift. You know, I've already been asked to cover, you know, on call for detectives. You know, that takes away from our administrative time. We have to do those things. You know, we've got to stabilize staffing. The raises that we did last year were a great job, and, you know, we got some quality people in here. But we're still, you know, we sacrificed filling two patrol positions to make sure we can stay in line with the budget numbers. But I would rather push off a renovation for the police department and make sure we get on top of staffing. You know, we've got, what do we say, Glenn, 4 or 5 that can retire?
Yeah, we have several that can walk out the door tomorrow, because we also, our patrol ranks also has members that are already retired ones. They're here doing us a favor.
Correct.
They may not come back tomorrow, along with several others. You know, we just gotta be ready to weather that storm when it happens.
You know, just staffing, you know, we had an officer involved in a pretty serious accident Monday night. And I mean, he was very fortunate to be walk away with no injuries. And, you know, we didn't lose somebody for a couple of weeks or months. But I mean, like right now we have, if you look at our schedule, we have 5 people on a shift 4 days a week. We have 4 people on a shift the other 2 or 3 days. Now, that's not counting any vacations, any sick, training. You know, so our staffing is very fragile. You know, you take one, and we got somebody on vacation, or usually we got somebody on vacation and somebody in training every week. We have to have 40 hours. We got a detective, he's been in school for 5 weeks. We got Ben Ray, you know, he just got promoted to sergeant. That Sergeant's Academy is 3 weeks. That's gonna be sometimes this summer. You know, things like that. With 26 people assigned to patrol, that's what we have right now. That's eight people per shift. We have a guy doing traffic safety. You know, that was one of the big things that we saw during the survey. People want us to see as officer out there doing traffic enforcement. So we got him on just a special detail doing traffic enforcement 5 days a week. Sometimes he comes out at nights. We let him have that flexibility in his schedule. But, you know, to do those things and those kind of special details takes extra people. So that's one of our biggest requests. Like I said, the biggest thing definitely we need, we'd like to get the cell phone software, some of those other things that we can kind of play with, but you're just putting them off down the road. I mean, those are things that have got to be replenished. Most of those things up there are things that, you know, they're just on a sequence. We didn't ask for any cars this year in our budget. We're still kind of working with Enterprise and trying to maximize our fleet. But we lost a car this weekend. It's a specialty car, so there's only one of those. So the K-9, you know, we'll be without a dog, one of our dogs, 4-6 weeks. You know, just because it's a specialty car, we don't have those. We don't have, you know, extra one of those. So we're definitely on a very, as far as operational, you know, we're on a very fine line. I mean, we're just Our budget's just asking for the minimum. We're not asking for anything extra. We would like to get those 2 positions back and to get that parking codes enforcement officer back.
Thank you, sir. Well, sound very serious. Any questions, comments from the commission?
So you don't have any of the cell phone software now? You-
We do have some, but not,
Not what you need.
yes, I mean, there's iPhone 16, 20, 21 out there now. You know how that stuff is.
What you talking about?
It's time to renew those licenses
Yeah.
on what we have now, and what we're looking at is cell drives, which gives us a lot more access to extract information when we do search warrants on cell phones. So this is an upgraded system as well.
Okay.
Is what we're asking for this year.
And the firing range, you don't have the capability to do anything at night, right?
We do, but it's very minimum. We have to be in and out about a certain time. When it gets to certain,
But I mean, you don't
Dark.
have lights and all of that to be able to be out there.
we do have some electricity
Okay.
out there, but it's rudimentary. Let's just say that.
Myself for a long time too. We worked on the road. And
Yes.
we did some clearing out there
Yes.
in my time here. And that's just, so, that firing range was built based on the standards of 2000.
Right. Oh.
Or maybe 1990.
Yeah, that's what I
Right.
was gonna say, maybe.
Like, so what they're talking about is legitimate things. When you're talking about active shooter training in a facility, that shooter's not just standing there looking at you, right? So when he's talking about the motion, he's talking about, can we do training in a building with some, can we see motion and shoot at motion? Those are training that we need to do,
Right.
right? You know what I mean? And so I just want to affirm, to be clear, we've done nothing out there other than basic rudimentary maintenance
Correct.
for 20 years.
Yeah, that was my.
I mean, like I said, we've done improvements to the road to get back to the range because it was just a gravel road there.
Mm-hmm. washed
I mean,
out, yeah.
Washed out, so we've made improvements for the road to get back through there. We expanded what we call the berm, the earthwork around. Public Works came out and made the range wider and bigger so we could get more lanes in there. So we've done some fundamental things like that, but like just to upgrade the infrastructure for electrical out there, there's barely water out there. We could use just a water fountain in the summer. It gets hot out there. A bathroom. There's some infrastructure there to do those things, but, we've just not been able to actually do that and just make some improvements. And when I say,
To train, we've got all this room, and we started to do our taser training and stuff down there in combination with our firearms training, but like I said, we need to update and use that space appropriately. It's a great location to be, it just, like I said, it needs updating, it's gotta be concreted. We've talked with Josh about maybe that's something the city could do. And, part of those range updates include, called Moto Shot, that's what we want. It's a movable target system. We have one that's on order that's coming in. They're gonna allow us to test it and make sure that it's the system we want, and it fits in our budget, and that's what we'll purchase. But it'll be here the 1st of June for us to test. So, anybody like to come see that get shot?
I was gonna say, I can
mean,
volunteer
maybe-
some city
yeah.
commissioners for you.
Did you point to me? He pointed to me, so there you
I
go.
said, I can volunteer some city commissioners for you. She said, I'm going there.
but, we'll, maybe at the fall range, we can invite you all down and just so you can just see some of it a little bit, But it's like Lynn said, the infrastructure's there. We've done a lot of research, we've talked to, like I said, we talked to Josh and, maybe they could come out and just lay in sections, concrete when they're not as busy. And that would cut down on us, hiring a contractor and that work done. And things like that. There's some probably electrical work that, you know, we will have to have somebody on the outside to come in and help us do there. But, we've already looked at,
Well, the weather is getting,
We could put it on our
Nicer.
facilities plan.
the weather has gotten nice. We need to do some of these tours.
Yep.
Maybe we should go to the facilities that need our immediate attention. You know, I've been excited about going to the place on Second Street, because it's supposed to be Taj Mahal or something, you know? But I'd like to
Oh,
go to a lot of facilities and see what we have to operate now. And I'm not complaining about it, but sounds like the range is in the same condition it was the last time you took me out there and let me do some shooting.
it is. I mean, like I said, we've had it on our capital fund the last 2 or 3 years. And, you know, we've pushed it back just because, you know, we'd like to do other things, and other things have taken priority. So that's why I put most of them as moderate, you know, but there are things that the further we push them off, they'll rise eventually into a high.
Well,
But-
the other thing is that they're needed, and right now they're quote-unquote affordable, and as we push them back, everything else the price just increases. And somebody keeps telling us to look at the citizen survey result, that, you know, they put priority number one as first responders, you know, and to me, that's police and fire, and the mayor, but, you know, I don't know.
So, I mean, that's, you
Yeah.
know, like I said, the police department would be, if we could, you know, if you all want to push that back, whatever, that's fine. That's not going to be a heartbreak to us.
The renovation?
Yeah, the renovation, but
Yeah.
it really is staffing. Just, we got to have that human resource capital. That's really gets down to it. Also, I have communications as under the umbrella here. I'm sorry. So as you can see, talking to Director Hafley, we've looked at those things. And it's kind of like the police department, especially when you're talking about your 911 servers and your replacement of the CADs and PCs, you know, it's 911. You know, that takes all those calls in, brings them in for our dispatchers to work with. I mean, that's a serious resource. Right now, just replacement of those servers and things, as Nick can tell you more about those things, you know.
Well, those PCs especially, those, you know, they're not like here where we go 160 hours a day. They operate 24/7, they need to be cycled in and out a little more often than, you know, what you can use some of the dynamics or.
And, you know, pretty much all that stuff is that's the problem, or that's the issue with these things. These things never stop.
Sure.
You know, like he says, they're
Sure.
24/7, 365. That, you know, so to replace those is just a little more frequently than, you know, like you said, you know, most stuff is just, you know, 8 to 5, 8 hours a day, maybe 9 hours. But these are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They just don't stop. So we do have to replace those out a little more frequently than we do some other things.
Okay. Questions about communications? All right.
So we also have the parking department, or parking fund here. Improvements to the parking garage. Somebody's always hitting a gate or something down there, you know.
I think Josh said that one was, for the garage was related to just some elevator
El-
improvements.
And that's what I was gonna say. Then we've also had the elevator issue. Me and Josh have talked about some things there. We're right now actually in the process of having the elevator come in and just kind of give us, hey, we've had this elevator with this system or in this garage for 20-some years now. You know, do we need to look at replacing the elevator? Do we need to look at some kind of new maintenance or, you know, just evaluate that elevator for us and tell us where we're at. We have had a couple repair issues the last year or two. And like I said, we don't know if it's an age issue or just a maintenance issue, really. Parking enforcement, the reason I have that as high is we just got to fix parking downtown, you know. So what I'm looking at is some kind of, a couple of years ago, I talked about meters. But now, you know, they've got systems where you have a barcode on a flag and people can come up, they can scan that barcode on their cell phones and they can say, I'm going to park 2 hours on Main Street, or I'm going to park 2 hours in one of the Second or Third Street lots, or I'm going to park in the parking garage for 2 hours. You know, you can set those things, you know, somebody scans it, after 5 o'clock, it's free parking, you know. It would cut down on needing maybe a second parking enforcement officer if we get, you know, could go to some kind of system like that. It wouldn't necessarily, like I said, be a meter. And so you wouldn't have to worry about disturbing some of the new concrete and things like that we've poured. And, you know, look at some kind of parking enforcement platform of that type. But, I mean, we've got to fix parking. Just on a slight note, you know, last month we announced that, you know, we were going to go back to 2-hour parking downtown. We just said it. So actually I had Nick go out and just walk around. And we saw, if you go up and down Main Street now, you'll see open spots. A couple of weeks before that, when we were not doing enforcement, almost every one of those spots was full all day long on Main Street. If you go up through there now, you'll see that some of them are open. And the businesses and the stores, you know, they need some open spots just so people can come and find parking spaces on Main Street. We're also having some issues on 3rd near Farmers Bank with some hospital staff, and they know that, and we knew that. You know, they work 12-hour shifts, 12 hours, those spots were locked in. You know, we made that announcement, and now you can go up down 3rd Street near Farmers Bank, and those spots are open. Now, we wrote a few tickets, but we haven't wrote that many. We went through a week where we just did courtesies as well. But we do have to come up with some kind of strategy for parking enforcement. And 50,000, that's just an estimate. I mean, we really have not get down into the system and seen what's out there. But that's, you know, that's just kind of out there.
Parking's always a tough one.
Yes. Thank you.
Can I go back to the police department real quick?
Nope.
Can you give us some good news? You got some recruits coming? I know you got people that you're working with in their second retirement, but,
So staffing was, for example, we have one recruit. She's a recruit. We started that process last July, last fall, and she's just now going to the academy this month. And that's going to be, you know, a 5-month process of just being in the academy. And then you're talking about another 3-month process after she graduates. You know, so that's over almost a year long, you know, just trying to get a new recruit with no training whatsoever. You're still talking about probably a 3-month process for us to bring on a lateral, somebody that's already certified, and bring them into the fold.
If we got permission to hire in July during a new budget, like that needs to be posted and open right now for us to even have a chance to get somebody in here for the summer.
Yeah.
Certified. A non-certified, I mean, that's next year.
Yeah, you're talking about a whole year for a non-certified, and about 3 months for a lateral. That's just, you know.
How it is everywhere, we can't do anything to expedite that.
Still have a waiting list at the academy?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, if you start a non-certified process now with everything that they have to go through, they have to get all the way to the point of conditional hire and approval before you could even.
Put them
grant
on,
a spot.
yeah, put them on the spot at the academy.
Right now, you would be looking at, maybe you could get a spot in the fall for someone, but they're not gonna graduate in 2025.
But that's if you were hiring them today.
That's right. That'd be 2 day, yeah.
If we wanted to hire certified to help us any for the summer, like I said, that needs to be open now.
You know, and I'm not always keen on hiring certifieds because, number one, you want to hire folks that you can integrate into your culture, but we need some freshmen.
Correct.
Like, we need some young folks getting into the police that want to be here 15, 20 years.
You gotta supplement, it's,
Right.
you need a mix. You know, we've been the agency that could hire certified, and that didn't work either, so, you need a good mix of both.
So the pay raise that we did mid-season allowed us to get some quality laterals. But you do have to look at your roster there and look at that band, okay, here's our people that are 20 and over. How many of them do we have on the roster? You know, how many do we have from that 0 to 10 and then that 10 to 20? You have to look at those three ranges. And you just kind of, got to weigh yourself there. The last couple of years, what we tried to do is we've kind of hired in pairs a little bit. So we've tried to get one that's non-certified and then we get one that is certified. And then the certified that you get, you got to look and see where they're at. I mean, have they got 10 years in? Have they got 20 years in already? Can they retire tomorrow? Like I said, we've got 7 or 8 that can, like I said, can just walk out the door right now. In July is the retirement month. Donna knows that, but that's July is the retirement month, just the way our retirement system works and everything. So it's also the fiscal year for us or for government. So a lot of times, we don't see that actual retirement date till the 31st of July. And the budget's been set. And that's kind of what happened to us last year. And that's why we had to make, a lot of other agencies in the state made pay raises around that time. And then boom, we had people jump because other places lost officers and different things like that. And then we were on the backside trying to pick it up.
So you've heard like the raises, and I mean, I know everybody would like to have more, but hearing what is being proposed in the budget, do you think that hopefully we would stay in that market with everybody, with our people that we have now, staying here? Or do you think, are you hearing a lot of other places jumping their pay up substantially?
I definitely feel like the raises that we implemented last year put us in a very good marketplace where we need to be.
Okay.
For the agency and the region that we're in. Remember, we are still considered one of the biggest departments in this region. And so our pay has to be there to make sure that we attract those people. And we were able to do that.
I would suggest adding bodies is more important for the police and fire strictly
Yeah,
because, I mean, that's my takeaway. I know Doug's gonna give you his opinion, which we want, but I just think you're facing, that turnover, adding those bodies back. I think then if you're looking for strategically managing your workforce for the police and fire, I think you gotta try to add a couple bodies back in addition to that, prep for turnover over the next 5 years, 3 years, if not sooner.
Yeah.
Are we gonna, and that was, I asked her, I think that's what we had all asked, for like that 3 to 5 year, look at what's happening in all these departments and how many people are we losing or could lose. I mean, do you overhire? I don't know the answer, but I'm just saying you gotta prepare to not just be without somehow. So if we could see that, like we did the 10-year capital would be nice.
Yeah.
Too.
We talked today a little bit about trying to give you all this, just let you all, I'll probably send you all something next week, and it'll just show you a schedule of our personnel, what a 2-week schedule looks like. Like I said, when we write it down on a piece of paper, 4 days of 5 people, 3 days of 4 people. But once you get vacations, sick, training, I mean, we're talking the other day, there's 2 days of day shifts, only got 2 people. Because of vacation and training. We've got to supplement those people's, overtime or something. And our overtime budget went way up last year because we had lost some people in July. We didn't replace them until the fall, but our overtime budget went sky high last year just because we were on a very short staffing list. And then when people, we had a couple of incidents where sickness, we had a death, just trying to replace and fill those spots. We put out a lot of overtime.
You guys do well, kind of maybe close this up with some compliments. Just as recent as Saturday, I had a retired peer compliment both police and fire that were Class A. So I appreciate hearing that.
Thank you. Like I said, I think we have quality people. I think, we've got some quality individuals. I get, texts and things like that all the time about, our officers doing good work, just being good ambassadors of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Chief followed by another chief. Right?
Good afternoon. We'll talk about our general fund here and our capital requests. Our firefighter turnout gear, that's something you're going to see every year. We buy 5 sets. It costs $25,000. Turnout gear is going up. Anything in the fire service has gone up probably 30-40% in the last couple of years. So that's going to be a number to continue to rise. But we want that to be on a rotation. We have 60 sets of gear, and we don't want to purchase 60 sets all at one time. They go out after 10 years, so we won't have that rotation going where it's not a $300,000 or $400,000 chunk at one time. It's manageable. Fire Station 2, minor renovations. It's a 20-year-old station. The flooring's 20 years old. The carpet's 20 years old, so it's time to do a little bit of renovation out there and clean it up a little bit. Our staff has done a fantastic job over the years. You go look at those 20-year floors, and they look pretty good. You're kind of surprised that they're 20 years old. That's because they're always cleaning, they're always making things look nice and taking pride in their structure they have. We'll be trying to replace the flooring, some windows out there as well. The windows are pretty drafty. You go in the wintertime and the shades are fluttering and the wind's coming through them pretty good. So this could be an energy saving thing for us as well. So it's pretty good. But we'll also some gutters, need some new gutters. We got a new roof last year. That was on capital last year. So we just want that station to last another 20, 30 years, whatever it needs. And I think doing some minor renovations this year will help that. Engine 19, that was ordered in 2022. So this is just now, hopefully we'll get it this year. Chief Mohan thinks we'll get it in October, November maybe. So, yeah. And Rosenbauer is actually really quick in getting the turnaround. So this is pretty fast, 2 years, 3 years. Some of the other manufacturers, it's 4-year wait now. So you really have to budget those engines out. We want to keep those frontline engines for 10 years. And that's going to be front line, making calls every day. And then we want to put them in reserve for another 5 to 10 years after that. And because you don't want to get rid of a fire truck right now. They're a very hot commodity. And we know a couple of years ago when we were almost down to possibly having to make a purchase, borrow or rent one, just because our 2 main engines were down, our backup. Our 24-year-old engine 17 was running primary. And that's something you don't want to happen. So we want to keep those trucks, maybe we refurb them, spend a couple $100,000 refurb them, keep those for a long period of time now. So we're actually got engine 17 stored at the blue building, the Bisco building down there. We're keeping that just in case of emergencies. So that we don't get caught like what happened a couple of years ago. So, to reiterate what Chief Gray said, staffing is the absolute main important thing to talk about today. We have 27 firefighters, that's 9 per shift. We have someone on vacation, someone calling sick, then we're down to 7 people for the whole entire city. And we're making over 3,000 calls a year. Back in 2010, when we only made 600 calls or so, you could work with 7 people. Now, we cannot work with 7 people. It's coming to be a safety issue. We actually deny vacation sometimes because we have to have a minimum of 7. We're only allowed to have 1 person off on vacation. So when someone puts in for vacation, needing off, we'll look at the operational schedule, and we may have to deny it, just because of that issue. That's something we don't want to get to. We don't like denying people vacation.
And we're having to force, they work their 24-hour shift, they're supposed to get off, and we're actually, I've been here for 25 years, and the last 3 years, we've forced more people than we ever have.
Yeah.
And it's getting worse.
Yeah.
It's just, they need time off, they see what they do, and it's not just our fire department, I've reached out to other fire departments, they're having the same problem too. But, they have a lot more staffing that help. We just need to get, keep staffing and increase staffing. I mean, Chief Simpson will talk to you, several times a year. When you dial 911, we don't have any apparatus available. We have to clear calls just to respond to a different call. So the only way to fix that is to put on more apparatus and more personnel. So that's kind of where we're at now. We're operationally maxed out, just like the police department is with the staffing we currently have. We're pushing the limits just like they are right now. And our staff is continually trying to be recruited by other fire departments because of, all the training standards and everything we have. So they're continually, the compensation package went forward, just like Chief said, was a great help. But, we have to continue to watch and make sure we get more staffing. I mean, we need more people to use it. City our size, most cities this size, the amount of calls we've done, we have they have 4 stations on that too. So any stations, you bring out more manpower. So that's something that you guys need to look at, kind of for your future. And just like what Chief was saying, and Chief Dunn was saying, that, there's a good possibility in the next 2 to 3 years, there's a whole entire shift and the fire department's not there anymore. So that's pretty hard to recover from if you don't start planning pretty quickly.
And if you bring a new recruit on as well, the Fire Commission now has a recruit academy where they can go for 11 weeks, I think. But it takes that recruit, if you don't go to the academy, it takes them about a year to get all their certifications. So we don't send those people to the academy. It's going to take a year for them to get certified on everything that we have. So.
And we no longer have the ability as a fire department, like we used to years ago, bring somebody off the street to train them. We don't have that anymore. They have to go to that academy. It's something that the fire commission started a couple years ago. I know you guys have known, we got a pilot class with you guys in the first ever class. They only have 2 academies. They have one coming up in August, and they have one in February, March. So, if we don't get them in that cycle, then, we have to wait for the next cycle.
So you're like the police.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that you have to wait, and there's going to be a backlog now for that as well.
Just like Chief was saying, one of our issues, 2 to 3 years from now, 6 people leave. You don't want to have 6 brand-new recruits on the street. You can't really have that. So we have to get some people in here pretty quick, the next year or so, to just start training them, get them integrated in our system. I know it's a lot of money, it's a big commitment, but Danville deserves it. The citizens deserve it, and, just the community in general deserve it. They need to have a qualified fire department. I'm a citizen here. I live on Perryville Road. 10 years from now, if I pick up the phone, I want to make sure that a qualified firefighter or police officer is coming to my house to do due diligence. I don't want to have to wait 10 or 15 minutes for someone to come. So we need to start thinking about hiring a lot of people in the fire and police side, just to fill that attrition, those people who are retiring out. But it is a big financial commitment. I don't know where the money's going to come from. Lee can attest to that. But we do need it. We have a need. So I think as a group and as a team, we can get our heads together and try to approach it from a holistic view that we can handle. So, that's about all I have. Any questions?
So you're asking for how many, I mean, how many would you like to have? in the-
We've
in the-
deferred one person because of compensation. So
Right.
we actually need that person back. And we have a retirement coming up in August. We probably need 2 or 3 more people, actually.
Okay.
And we probably need to do that at least every year, every 2 years, hire 2 or 3, just to keep that going. We need actually 36 is what our number needs to be. So that'd be 9 additional people in the next 3 to 5 years.
We can't put an extra apparatus on, we have to have at least 2 people. That's the only way, 2 extra people per shift is the only way we put an apparatus on. We have to travel in pairs of 2, like the police officers do. So that's the only way we can add apparatus and multiple people. We have to overhire, 3 years or several years in order to get us where we need to be. That's an addition to where our budget is.
Yeah. All right. Any more questions? Very good.
And nothing's being advertised currently? I guess we have to do our budget and first, okay.
Yeah. So, that's correct. And we work really well with Randy and Earl. They're well aware of our needs. It's just a matter of trying to find that balance, But it is getting pretty fragile and pretty critical for our staffing. It's a dangerous situation, like Chief said. You don't want to force someone to work 48 hours, straight.
I do have a question for Lee or Earl. I mean, okay, I know we have to wait till July, but can you put it out now? Just because you're removing some, or, I don't know.
You can put it out.
And not do anything with it, but sort of get prepared, maybe? I don't know.
I mean, legally, you could put it out. That is a open position on our compensation plan. You are likely going to increase your budget. We'll have to have a budget amendment essentially if they did get hired on prior to the end of the fiscal year to adjust for that compensation. The harder part that you all will have to weigh in on is balancing the budget, right? These are staff members which have salaries, retirement, medical care, all of that, which does not end, right? Versus a capital project that is a one-time cost, right? There's maintenance costs on those things, but this is a person that you're hoping is gonna be here for 30 years. So as evidenced by our budget surplus of $46,000, as it stands right now, right? We either have to do more cuts in operations, or we have to adjust revenue upward in some fashion, which means either adjusting our estimates or additional sources. So it's a balance, and you guys have to give us direction on what you want us to do. So you can do that, but we need confirmation from you on which direction to do that in, because as it stands now, I would be hesitant, this is my personal opinion, Earl can differ, that without you telling me which way to go, as it stands now, we have in the current year, they deferred those positions to balance it for this year. So for next year, balancing it is in a different way, another question.
I'm just thinking if you could be ready July 1st, or not hire them until,
Absolutely.
but be prepared to hire 'em.
Hiring is such a long process, because
It's
you might
such a
get
long
all the way through it, and then they
Yeah.
turn the position down.
Right.
Right, that happens, or, they can't start for 2 months.
Right,
So-
just a thought, so there would be no money going out.
We will, Randy and I are working through, we'll be working through what the authorized position list will look like. We know that we've got to discuss when that turnover will happen. When do you overhire in advance of that? I'm trying to think through that now, how to propose that. And Randy, we will ask and work with Randy on how to present that and when. It should be this fiscal year. It may not necessarily be a regular budget meeting. It could be a regular commission meeting that we go ahead and jump on that agenda with it. We're trying to, we understand that we're a little bit compressed this year strictly because of me not being here for a few weeks. So we're missing a couple of meetings. So they're, like Monday night, we're dealing with community agencies. I've got to figure out when we have this authorized position conversation. That's in my head, and which is what you're talking about. What does a 3-year, 5-year look like in turnover? If we know someone's going to retire, then, you know, logically, beginning the hiring process in front of that is totally reasonable and makes sense. So we'll work, we're trying to figure out when and how to work through that so that we can include it or consider it in the budget process.
To your point, we were talking about, you know, we talked about it the last, the plan, we've already made some, right, so we talked about taking a step back. And developing every department knows that we know well, it is creeping up on us fast. We're talking about police and fire, we haven't talked about water.
I was gonna say that.
Water utilities is another major impact area, Marshall has conversation. So that is for our department, that's probably the number one strategic objective this year is to lay out what that plan is. We gotta get it done this year.
Right.
Yeah, the fire department, water plant, turnover, police department, demand and turnover. You know, I mean, each one of them's kind of nuanced a little bit, so.
I will say this, too, we've talked a lot about this, you know, you know, it's been a challenge, because we're, you know, as we increase our department stuff, we'll notice. One thing we don't want to lose sight of is not just, obviously, pays the number of those, we want to keep those total rewards and total benefit packages. Try to keep it expanding on that as we can financially, because that's one of the things that separates the city from other agencies as well. Good work-life balance, like the chief's talked about. This year's been tough too, because I haven't openly talked about it, but this year, in the past 12 months, we've had about 30% of the workforce on FMLA. And so that drives up overtime a lot of this through various factors.
It's not a matter of unhealthiness. It's not a lifestyle, you know,
just
like,
things
for
happen.
example, meat.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I know that there's HIPAA violations, all that stuff, so I'm willing to talk about myself. I mean, you know, I was in an accident, that's no fault of the city's, but that's been prolific over the last really 18 months to 2 years. I mean, you know, and every department has been impacted by it. We've seen the direct cost to the operating budget and health insurance costs have spiked. So that's not controllable necessarily, and it's not necessarily, are we just having a good health year or bad health year? It's neither one of those. Sometimes it just is that way, and we're trying to manage around that, and so it's all those things coming into play. Doug and Mike and Tony and Glenn and Randy and every department head's working hard to try to, and that, I hear it constantly, and we're trying to react to it, and so it's the salary adjustments are not exclusive. That does not fix your problems.
No.
You know, I mean, that makes you market competitive. You know, and that rewards people in the market for what time they're putting in on behalf of everybody else. And so that is foundational, but there are other needs also.
And it's really challenging because it's not like a one-size-fits-all program that is assessed by department. And also we've got to talk about leadership development, we talk about that. We want to be able to have, ideally, you'd like to hire an intern, especially for those key jobs. That's not always the case. City, but we prefer to hire them in. So that's another, so we're trying to put all that together. So we're already, we're all brainstorming. The fact that we're having this open conversation today is a big step in the right direction. But this is a year that we're going to put, really think about. Do you put in a budget cushion and say, okay, we know we're going to have 2 potential hires down the road next year, we budget in some excess funds, say to overhire for 6 months, whatever it may be. Those are the kind of things that go something. I don't know what it can be financially, but that's one of the strategies that you can take. You got to be funds there.
Would a budget cushion be beneficial for taking more advantage of the large job fairs? We had a really big one in spring. Some people are like, ooh, I want to apply. And then I helped a few try to call and there was nothing to apply for.
So there's so the job fairs are fine, honestly. That ideology is a little bit dated, frankly.
Okay.
The population demand, or the demand on the population for all sector jobs, we need to grow the population of the community. I mean, you've got an aging workforce, you're losing people at a rate. Just getting someone, we need younger folks to move into our watershed, our area. That is workforce development for us. And just, I appreciate a good job fair, and I know our economic development folks are trying to do that. But there is more to workforce development for us foundationally is housing, for example, to help people move here, make decisions to move here, quality of life stuff to get people to move here. Those things are as important for us as workforce development as anything else we can do. And if we can get people to move here, then you're going to end up with a spouse that's unemployed that may become a police officer or a firefighter or whatever, water treatment operator. We've seen that too. So I just don't want to lose sight when we're talking about workforce development, and I try to repeat it a lot. It is not as simple as job fairs, and I am being sincere in that, and I'm not being to diminish that effort.
Thing too is reducing those barriers to continuing education. That's another part. Like the TCTC Farm program, where we put together an apprenticeship program for cold water and marshal. Those are things that we're trying to do to reduce those barriers to education. We're playing a long game, right? That's what we're trying to figure out how to play a long game.
You go back to the workforce participation rate is 10% lower here than in other places because we are an aging community. 10% for us is 1,700 people. So we need 1,700 people to move here to fill those jobs. That's just us. Well, the same problems happen in Kentucky. What is it, a 9% underutilization of the workforce? So it's a Kentucky issue. It's not a localized issue, which is why you're seeing small business development happen at the state chamber level at a very high rate. They're the ones that fund the study that demonstrated that statistic. So it's a bigger issue than just simply good recruiting. I mean, we have to facilitate an environment where folks want to live and entice people to move here.
That's a great segue. Nick, you've been waiting very patiently, sir. I know you always say you're good, but still it's what, 3:30?
Thank you.
Any more questions for Chief?
I have one. Again, I'm a little off on this, off personnel, but our infant drop box, kind of utilization, want to make a comment on that?
No,
Fire station too?
yeah, we've had a lot of comments. People are really excited about it, especially in the community, but we haven't had any utilization yet. Hopefully, we don't have any. I mean, that's our,
That's a good
that's our
thing.
main goal. But it is a safe place for somebody if they do want to surrender an infant. That's really good for our region to have that.
If you just have one out there and it saves a life, that's all you need.
That's right.
Yeah,
Awareness has really grown about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is.
yeah.
Worry about whether it gets used. I'm just curious, because you're talking about staffing, and if those folks are out on a call, Station 2, there's nobody there
Yeah,
to hear the alarm.
Yeah, we'd make sure somebody get out there pretty quick. Yeah.
They have cameras. Yeah.
Would you all hear the alarm on the trucks or something?
And it goes across 911 across the.
Dispatch gets it, and what they
Yeah.
do is they'll dispatch us, and we've got protocols in place that
Yeah.
we're all tied up.
The police.
Another agency.
Pretty
So
neat.
someone will be there if they need to
Yeah.
surrender. Just
Pretty neat how it works.
We could always send Lee or me out there too. That's what they want to see is one of our smiling face. Yeah.
Let's move along.
Thank you.
Chief.
We can send
Make
Nick
no
out there.
You fight with the baby, we don't want to show up. Right? Come on, brother. Nick's a very patient young man.
So we talked about these when I did my budget presentation. The primary core switch, our core switches are what we call an aggregation switch. It's where all of our outbuildings, all of our various department infrastructure comes into to get access to core services. So if one of these goes out, basically everybody's down to an extent. So our current switch is reaching capacity. That's why we want to put the primary switch in. And this year, we would like to add redundancy to that system since it is, the primary aggregation of all of our IT infrastructure. So,
You should have
That
been
was
first,
simple.
man. Seriously.
I mean,
Wow.
they're very pricey too, as you see. It's,
Yeah, but still, well, they're important. We understand that. They're really important.
They are.
Keeps us all going. I dare ask this. Any questions for Nick?
This is the whole city, covers the whole city. See, I had.
so, yeah, this is what everything else talks into, yeah. There are, smaller systems out there, but this is where everything comes back into and gets our core services.
Do you have any manpower issues?
No, we're in pretty good shape, you know.
All right.
Now, I will say, in a few years, that may change as, the city's growing, our
Yes,
number of
that's
devices are growing,
Yes.
we're implementing a new network for utilities. I don't know if Marshall talked about it. We're doing SCADA over cellular. We're building out a private network, and so it's growing. Right now, we're good, but, 2 or 3 years, that may change.
And you're taking care of all the other departments. That's the neat thing about you guys, yeah. You don't look at it that way, but it's really important.
And we touch a lot of things, and a lot of our budget is not large, but a lot of our stuff is, all of these capital projects they're talking about, we'll have a hand in a good portion of those.
Yes. Look at Chief back there, yeah. Yeah, I realize that a lot of departments would not function well without you guys taking care of all of us, so I understand that, yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir. And make a request next time for you to be first, man.
I usually go first on the department presentation. We'll flip it the other way.
No, that'd be great pressure to put on them. Thank you, sir. Ooh.
So the last,
I gotta go get my cell phone. Can I go get my cell phone? No, just go ahead.
you don't get a cell phone. You got a tablet. I think that's good. We're cutting costs here, Mayor Atkins.
Wait, hold on, time out. Have y'all been to the basement? I walked down there one day and I said, man, there was 39 cell phones on one desk down there.
Whoa.
Yeah, right there, look, he put it to the chief. Yeah, I was like, whoa, I just oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. It was funny.
This is the finance department request. We are in need of business license software. Currently, we use a extremely old and dysfunctional database called FileMaker. It's not even a actual software, it's just, Nick wrote it. It has
He's in high school,
lost,
right?
it has lost, he's not kept up, our provider is not doing their duty. It's just, the amount of data in it is just too big. It's, so we need an actual software that is purposed for business license. There's also a few permits that Josh has that, through his stormwater ordinance, he'll be issuing in the near future. So kind of, we're looking at something that can double duty, track and issue those as well. But permitting essentially software for business license, to also give us some reporting capabilities that we don't currently have, and to provide currently, this is, we can only access this current business license software on one computer in the whole city. So when my staff is, like, she's on vacation this week, when she is out, we have to, do that from her desktop. Even though we've made great strides in making business licensing available all online, to actually go and input that information, we still have to physically go and do it at her computer. So we're going to be, there's a few that I know of that we kind of want to talk to, but there's some really good softwares out there that will make it much more efficient, and just better for me as a department head. So I've estimated 20,000 because those are kind of heavy on the creation and implementation. Currently, when you export out our data for that business license software, you get an Excel sheet that's about 10 to 15,000 lines long of old data that's been input. Within that process, we would go through a very manual and time-consuming process to help us identify businesses that are no longer in the city, that are just no longer, they've closed, they've moved, and to help just identify who's still here, who's not. and to make sure all the information that we have on file is complete. Some of that stuff from back in the 80s, we might have a name and a business license number, and we know that, the hospital, whether they don't have a business license in the same way, but they have a license number and a sign. But we know that they're here, but I'm going to bet some of the information we have is just not up to date because it's been years since they originally had their information input. So just, that's it. That's my little tiny request.
You short just like Nick.
Uh-huh.
And let me give Nick a compliment. That state-of-the-art software he created, well, that was his graduation project from 8th grade.
It was, and
Yeah, so it was state-of-the-art back then, Jack.
I know that Nick will take it lighthearted and I make fun of it. But he is just as frustrated.
There you go.
His guys are just as frustrated with it
Oh, I know.
as my ladies. Because it does have a few issues, so.
Let me see, one computer.
It was supposed to be a stopgap, and we looked at business license and software like.
Yeah. It just never, no, it's not been made a priority, so we want to make it a priority in the upcoming year,
Well, that's neat.
so. Any questions before we wrap up about capital, before we move on to economic development?
So I wanted you guys to hear from the department heads again directly on their capital requests, so you could sense their urgency and what their priorities were. I'm asking you all to help me filter that and help give me some direction that then we can go back as a team and work together on what that looks like. We'll probably carry a little bit of this conversation into Monday night during the city manager's report. I know that I'm gonna talk about the community agencies with you. And we'll probably have a broader discussion about what does it look like on your capital? Are you interested in pursuing some of the heavier capital, like the pool with some bonding and debt service? We want to confirm that from your guys' perspective. So I'd ask you to think about that this weekend. Monday night, we will ask you to ratify what direction you want us to go. What direction you want us to go with that small surplus. We know that it's got to a point where it's like $46,000. So do you want us to pursue adding that first position back to the police department? We know that we got to add back to the police and fire after that. The overhiring process, we know we got to follow up on those things. So as we're developing the budget, what we'd like to do is work from a balance point and just kind of see where that leads us. And so we appreciate the dialogue. That helps us a lot. And so we'll try to carry that conversation forward Monday night. Then if y'all don't have any other questions on the budget, we included the economic.
Wait, hold. I do have one.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Compton, we're required to carry a certain contingency?
So we're required to have a fund balance, what's the word that I'm looking for? We have a fund balance minimum that we're required. Is that what you're asking
Yes,
about?
ma'am. Is it
Yes.
5%, 10%, 20%?
It is 25% of your operations, your debt service, and your non-departmental department excluding the capital items. So we are meeting that
No, wait,
with
I
this.
understand that. So if we wanted to go out on a limb, see, I can go out on a limb because I'm not up for reelection. And take the contingency and fund all these projects and be in violation of that contingency for 1 year, would you allow us to do that?
No, it's written into your ordinance that you cannot do that.
Is that the high end, or is there a
Couldn't afford it
certain
anyway,
minimum
though.
that you?
The minimum is 25%. It is
Okay.
written into the ordinance.
So she and I talked a lot about this. She's giving you,
Statewide.
Oh, statewide?
What is
So,
the-
so legally, you
Legally.
could change the ordinance.
Right.
So currently, I have to stay at 25%.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
can,
Yeah.
you can change that. However, I would urge caution that you do a significant deep dive and read quite a few things that I would give you to read before you chose to do otherwise. Because, a significant downturn in your economy could put you in a hurdle where if you spent all that money on capital projects, then you could also not pay your payroll. So you don't want to be in a position where I can't pay people.
And the reason why I asked that question is that anybody watching this will say, oh my God, our city's broke. Well, we're not broke. We're trying to
Yeah,
abide by our own.
we're not broke
We're trying
by
to
any
abide by our
stretch.
own policies.
But you have to consider that something happens and you
Yes,
don't
ma'am.
get the money
That's
you
right.
think you will.
But some communities operate a little bit more riskier than us.
They do,
And so there's a possibility.
yes.
I'm not encouraging it, but I just think everybody needs to know that we're still in real solid financial shape. We could lower that balance and take care of some of these projects without going into debt, but that, you would advise against that at a certain point.
And that is what you have done historically over the last 3 years, budget
Mm-hmm.
years. You had a larger surplus that had built up
Yes,
in your
ma'am.
reserves, and we've spent that down at parks, on the tennis courts, on several streetscapes, a lot of things like that,
Yeah.
that we've spent down.
Yes.
So to do that kind of thing again, in my opinion, you would want a bigger reserve surplus than we have currently. Currently, our projected target fund balance is really set to handle operations.
But you said it's at 20%, 25%.
25%.
But if we decided as a commission to change the policy and go to,
Legally, I think the lowest you can go is 5%. That's really low, though.
yeah, but I'm not saying, I'm just saying, we have some wiggle room if we decided to go
You
from
do have some wiggle
25% to 20% or to 18%. The only caution is that it had to be things we financed that would be one-time only things, not
Yes.
things that are gonna be there all along, but I think it's important everybody to understand that, that's a possibility. The main thing is that the city's in good shape financially with this budget. We just
Yes.
can't do all the things that our staff needs for us to be able to do right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that 25% was designed around what our cash flow is, when we get tax revenue in. That 25%, there's a significant portion of that has two purposes. One, it's your cushion
Yes, sir.
to mitigate your cash flow demands. Then two, there's always a balance that is preserved to handle your big emergency. So for
Yes.
example, the ice storm, we spent $1 million on the ice storm, as, you know, plus or minus a little bit back in the day. Because it was an ice storm, and then it took us years to get money back from FEMA. And so there's always some of those factors that we have to consider, but the fund balance was designed for that purpose.
Yes.
So what we'd like to do is take what money we have, what margin is above that fund balance. We have given you a spreadsheet that has all of our cash on it. So it's in there for you to look at. If you got a question around that Monday, it's delineated and what's restricted, what's internally restricted. So, you know, if you have a bond payment, you have a reserve fund tied to that bond that you're required to maintain. So that money's not accessible unless it's an emergency repair on the facility that the bond originally covered, right? So there's all kinds of elements to that. So she's done a good job breaking that out and giving you what we believe over the last few years. We've got the fund balance at a level through investment and capital that it's probably where it should be, truthfully, for the city. It's not in excess, it's not under. The city's job isn't to be a reserve bank. It's not to stockpile money. But at the same time, we do need a cash reserve that makes the city liquid in case of emergency, right? So Lee and I will analyze that after you give us, too, a little bit of direction. Are you interested in borrowing money? Is that something you want to do for the pool? Now, if you want to do that, then what else logically should be depreciated? So what else should that bond cover, right? Like, should it cover one more thing besides just the pool, right? So then that would not come off of your reserve. So as we talk through that Monday night, anticipate that conversation, think about how you want to handle that, what you want to do based on the information we've given you. And then we'll continue to vet that over the next couple of weeks and get to a point hopefully within 2 weeks where we start to look like, okay, this is what we really think that we're going to do next year, right? After we believe we have our baseline operating expenses covered and balanced. Is that fair?
Yes.
Yeah. I pointed at Commissioner Pete because she always reminds us about these partnerships. And if we had some answers to the partnership questions, we could probably
Right.
agree to do a few more things because they would cost us 50% less, but we don't have those answers right now.
And
Well-
they're in their budget, so it would be nice.
Well, but you still have to commit to bonding if you're going to do them.
Right.
Yes, that's right.
And
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
I don't want to necessarily be I want to make sure you all are willing to do that
Yes.
before we start to have a big dialogue with the county or whoever that partner would be, right?
Yes.
Unless you are able to stomach that, then that conversation is futile.
Yeah. Well,
probably.
even a dialogue with them though about some of these projects that we could take off the table and without bonding, if we had some dual support.
Yeah,
There are several of them,
yeah.
but I can't get that answered though.
Well, and it all centers around economic development, which is
Yes.
why we want to do a good job and why we
Yes.
wanted to include that as part of this conversation. Because this does tie into future revenue and sustainability of the city. I have this slide. We did this when the EDC, literally the information was on it. And I was thinking about, what to say tied to economic development. But this is the key, really. This is what we as a community, as expressed through the Development Corporation, should be doing, right? And it's that opening paragraph, which is the economic development is not just land acquisition and development. To be successful, it requires a multifaceted approach to community marketing, workforce development, business retention and growth, and business recruitment. I think that is really a comprehensive statement and really needs to be embodied or embraced by everybody tied to our economic development team and organizations, right?
Yes.
The priorities of focus, business retention and expansion, workforce development is not as simple as having a job fair. People have to be adequately trained. We have to identify kids in the community that are not necessarily wanting to leave town, but how do we integrate them into our workforce? How do we help as high school senior identify Commissioner Sears as an opportunity with his small business that he owns, or Commissioner Holland, what their business is that they own? How do we integrate these kids into these industries, right? That is as much workforce development as anything. And that doesn't necessarily happen at a job application. That happens as we're inspiring those kids to start their own business after a few years, right?
Yeah.
Then business attraction, we have to recruit new industry to our area. We have a pad-ready site in our industrial park that's owned by the Industrial Foundation. We need to get a building on that thing. So how do we recruit an enterprise that the Industrial Foundation can align its interests with as an organization, align the community interest? How do we develop, how do we continue to add large scale jobs and small scale jobs to that, you add 10 small businesses that are 5 jobs apiece, well, that's the same as a factory.
That's right.
Right? So those elements of the economy are all important. And so we also note the workforce development, the chambers is mentioned, the small business program, we would argue that we need to see if you're being asked to contribute funds to a small business or program, what is that program? Don't just throw money at it. The state of Kentucky has the small business, there's the Small Business Association that has funding, loans. That stuff it has to be programmatic. And most communities rely on the Chamber of Commerce to take a leadership role in that small business development, right? So that dialogue has to continue to come to fruition. We've got to come up with what that program looks like. Right? And I don't think that's fully developed, and simply assigning money to it doesn't fix it, and certainly doesn't develop a program that can be functional and sustainable, right? So we have to lean into what does that program look like and design that program, and then you could probably have a more intellectual conversation about how you fund it. At the same time, communication and collaboration, we have to have our partnerships in this way. Starting small business programs, housing, all those factors come into play. So economic development is a big thing. We appreciate the work the Development Corporation is doing. I think they're structured well. They have staff, and so we'll continue to lean in and try to support that as their needs come about, certainly administratively. But this is really a community slide, not just an in-city slide.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And then, but what is the city doing in-house? So we have our 4 priorities that we have that really I think about every day, and I know I urge different department heads to be integrated into some of these issues as time passes. So, for example, the downtown master plan, that is something that I think about or deal with almost every day in some way. It's not always seen, and I appreciate that, but I've had multiple conversations in the day I'm in tied to the downtown master plan concept, right? And we hope that we can have news out of that program in the future and will contribute to the, I guess, the goals esteemed by the master plan concept, right? Which is essentially the additional of supply of building space downtown to meet a growing demand for residential and commercial space downtown. Infrastructure projects, that is economic development for the city. The water, the sewer, that's heavy infrastructure. The Parks and Rec is quality of life infrastructure. Our streets and roads, public safety, those are infrastructure projects where we're contributing to economic development. For example, I know that we're behind on mowing going across the viaduct, right? I want you all to understand that that is the level of, that we look at in economic development on a daily basis. We look at those things. And Josh and I will do a ride around to make sure, with all the rain that we've had, that we're caught up on the city mowing. I know on 4th Street in front of the fire station, the utility strip's not mowed. That needs to get cut. And so we'll talk about that. And infrastructure, workforce development, retention, we do that across the board. Randy's had ideas. We're working with BCTC in developing training programs for city staff. We're trying to encourage those folks to see that opportunity outside of just the city. So use the city as a model on how do you do training for other agencies. There's other agencies with way more employees than the city. So can you pick off of things Randy's doing, for example, for the city employees, and take that model into other businesses and train up the workforce in those businesses? So we're dealing, but more than anything, we are into community development. We are a community partner. Part of the conversation that we have on a daily basis is someone calling the city and saying, hey, we need this. Where do we get this done? And it's our job to make sure we know where we can steer that person. And even if it means facilitate a meeting between 2 different businesses, which what we have scheduled, or I have scheduled for me next week, so that we can marry those non-competing interests, so that those 2 folks can work together to achieve success for both of those companies. So that community building, that community development is what we do every day in-house. That's our role in economic development. And the EDC is dealing with all that other retention and recruitment of new industry and new businesses and the ancillary support of workforce development. So I want to talk about that and make sure when I identify those things, is there things that we're not doing? I want you all certainly tell us that if we're not addressing something, please advise us of that and let us know. And we didn't do a strategic plan this year like we did last year because we felt like you did it. So we do think that has a couple years' worth of legs to it. We tried to illustrate through the capital projects how that strategic plan that you all envisioned last year is getting addressed. And sometimes it's not easy to see, but we, hopefully, when you go back, you can look at the icons and you can see how almost everything that you've noted is getting addressed through our normal capital program, right? So now you know that the city's capital program of staff isn't just willy-nilly. It isn't just about what the department head wants as a department head. All those things are tied together and hopefully build towards a stronger local economy where we have an environment where our businesses and our citizens can thrive and have a high quality of life. That's our goal. That's what the city does every day.
And Earl, I would advise you, require you, whatever the proper word is, when you have a lot of these meetings around town with people that are doing economic development, that this be the key to the conversation. Because just reading this and reviewing this, you can see where different fractions of our community have gotten away from this. So it really be a nice reminder for all of us to put this up someplace and say, let's share this with a lot of people. Okay? Kevin, welcome back, Commissioner Carter. Donna showed you a slide that says, thank you for your attendance, didn't she? Yeah? Any other questions or comments to staff? It's been a long afternoon, but it's been a productive afternoon. I guess my thing about this budget process is that because you all have really attempted to make it so open to all of us that it's almost like a line by line by line by line, all the things that we think we need to see our city staff working on, we need to see if we can find them in this line by line budget. And if there are things that we think need to be in there that we can't find, now's the time to find them and bring them to staff. And I would say keep in mind with the $50,000 or less, that we'd have to move some things around, rob Peter to pay Paul to make some adjustments, to put some different things in the budget. But I realize there are a lot of things in there that we haven't talked about individually. They're inside the different departments. They're on line item types of things. And we need to just toss them all out. Now, not at Monday's regular meeting, but we need to toss them out and make sure we have a dialogue about those things. But I'm feeling good about it. I wish you'd told me there was 450,000, not 50,000, but we'd say, well, put it on this, and this, but, we'll take what we've got right now. Okay, other comments?
Did you say you're going to provide us with a worksheet?
For community agencies, you should have one.
Oh, okay, I thought
The-
for
yes.
everything, okay. no.
Yes.
You just pencil that in and turn that back into Ashley if you can and when you can over the next couple of days. And
You
then
said
we'll,
before he goes home today.
we'll have that assembled Monday night for you to consider together.
Okay.
Yeah.
During Ben Durant's presentation last week, he talked about being a 25% partner with building updates. Is that anywhere, or do we need to talk about that at
Well,
some point?
It is, that, there's a list of those, the homeless initiative. I'm going to include that when we're talking about the thing Monday night, when we're looking at the community agencies, I'll have a list of those things that are community agency minded, maybe that's not operational. That's more of a capital expense, so that would
Right.
really come out of
Right.
reserve.
Okay,
So we'll summarize all that stuff again Monday night when we give those sheets back out, when y'all average what you're contributing for
okay.
just the operating.
Because his number, I don't recall it, do you?
It was right at $50,000 for
46?
capital.
Okay.
Yeah, his request was right at 50,000 for capital. But you'll see that listed again Monday night.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't requesting all that from us, right? And then also the food pantry had a capital request as well. New Hope Food Pantry, was it? They had a capital, okay.
They did have, they also had a capital
Capital
request.
request, right?
20,000,
Off the top of my head, it's escaping me how much, but I feel like it was,
28,
yeah,
That was the cost of the building, though.
no,
that was their
Portion
request.
they
I
asked.
think they were projecting in total about $100,000.
172,000, I think.
Uh-huh.
They were asking us for 28?
Yes.
Oh. Okay. Oh.
And I mean, I'm gonna say this, I don't know how anybody else feels, but I know we have to do the agencies to give you some kind of guideline, but I almost feel like, don't you take care of your own things first before you say, well, here's the excess money that we spend? I think I don't know, that's me personally, that maybe you could do those later towards the end, when if we, we see all these needs of our staff and the people that we need. I know there's a balancing act, there's gotta be, but
So you're right, we have, on the community agency sheet, just for everybody, that sheet there, in our operating budget, we have $159,000 set aside for the columns basically on the left, the three on the left. The right, we have funded basically at the levels last year, except for planning and zoning, and we've moved DHB into that. So they, in our budget, have gone from 75 to 100 because we've done that with DHB. Now, so you've got $159,000 there. If you've spent no money on community agencies, you could easily add the police officer, take the other $46,000, and you could probably add 2 police officers, or a police officer and a firefighter. You've got room there that's money that could go directly towards operations.
And
So-
any agency on this list, as an individual member of the commission, for the 25 allocation, I could put a 0 down.
Absolutely, yeah. You are not obligated to fund anybody up there other than your shared agencies.
and I'm not necessarily saying not fund them, that's not my take on it. I'm just saying, in your home budget, you would take care of your home budget first before you spend money on something else you want or need.
You got to pay your electric bill before you
Exactly.
landscape.
That's all I'm saying.
Right.
For me, that's just a.
Yeah, that's all right. No, that's good point. Yeah. That's why it takes 5 of us. Yeah. And we have, well, I shouldn't say that out loud, but we have gone up and down with some agencies in our desire to request them. And then you made a statement about shared agencies. But even those shared agencies, our contributions can go up and down for just about all of them. Planning and zoning would be kind of hard, but the rest of them, I think, could go up, because we're tied to staffing and planning and zoning, aren't we?
Yeah,
I'm not advising us to do that, but I'm just saying,
you're funding the operations of the EDA, and you are agreeing to fund your operations through the Development Corp. The airport, there's an element of that you're contributing capital dollars to match their program with. So, I'm not saying that's the minimum, but
yeah.
certainly you don't have to add anybody to I know there are some new agencies that are wanting money, some wanting money again, so.
It's
I
tough
do like the
decisions.
delineation because there is a demand, there's a community pressure for the city and county to invest in the homeless initiative. That's tax dollars, so if you want to get into the philosophy of taxes for a second, that's property taxes. You do have other taxing agencies, like the health department is a countywide taxing district. You, as a community, if you want the city and county to agree, if the health department adjusts that tax rate to fund a homeless initiative, then the city, ultimately, the county has to endorse that tax rate. So by embracing whatever investment you want in homelessness, it doesn't necessarily have to come from the city and county's operating budget to do that, is what I think the important thing on homelessness is you don't want to put the homeless issue in a situation, which we've always done here, in a situation where every year we got a debate on, do you fund it fully? Do you fund it this amount? When you can embed it in a sustainable, reoccurring revenue source, then it means it's going to be a sustainable program. When you're trying to put it in competition with the police and fire, well, what's more important, right? How do you measure that? The citizens in the citizen survey said your police and fire are more important, right? So that's and I know that, the health department may not be prepared for that conversation. They may not be, I don't know those things, but there's an element of that does need to carry the conversation through it, though, and I don't know that all those things have been talked about fully. I think though, in the short term, there may be some stopgap investment in issues so that you can have all those conversations. But you certainly don't want to create a program where you've got salaries over here fighting against salaries over here. That is unhealthy on its face, right? That is just creating unnecessary potential future conflict on its face, right? It seems to me you're better off to have dedicated revenue towards a dedicated expense. So,
And reoccurring revenue.
and a reoccurring sustainable revenue against that expense.
And in this budgetary process, does time allow for us to have some of those conversations?
It's complicated. I think they should. I think you should take the time to have those. I know, the county's on their path. They've got their own deadline. They're trying to meet their objective. I think the city, the difference between the city and the county and some of the other agencies is if you need to amend your budget to change your path, you can do that. I think that can be done by the city. I think for other agencies, it's a little bit more cumbersome, And I think our partnership with the United Way and dealing in distribution of some of those resources to these agencies is a great idea. I think the timing of it's going to be hard. I think, they allocate in the fall for next July, whereas you're allocating right now for this July. So that's going to be a harder thing to align than what both us and United Way realized. I think them having an intermediate program right now, in the short term for this short window and the dollar amount that we're talking about isn't probably worthwhile for them to have just an individual process for $40,000. It doesn't really, it's not cost effective. The Senior Citizen Center for our community has been funded at that level because we have demanded certain behavior from it. So for us, when we talk about doing that still, but through the city, well, we need to have more dialogue about that with United Way so that we understand why the city does that. And, because the United Way does the funding for the Senior Citizen Center in Lincoln County. So that's a little bit confusing. So we want to continue that dialogue. That's a great idea, but that's just probably not a finished idea so that we can execute it yet, even though we were trying to fit it in. So we're going to continue that dialogue. I know that's just a loose end conversation that we're trying to have.
Still taking steps towards it. I think if the dialogue continues, the United Way could think about semi-annual disbursements,
Yeah,
and that might help them get back in line.
yeah.
They could take whatever amount we give them and distribute accordingly in a semi-annual. On the shared agencies, I think the mayor brought up a good point about just talking about it. That's really economic development as well. Yeah, shared agencies for the most part.
Yeah, true.
And another option is, as we find little pockets of money, it's okay to use it for some of these one-time, small capital request things, because it's one time, you know, and so you can think about those too.
You do have a history of doing those small capital projects for the community agencies. The city gave money towards BCTC's expansion to affirm to the state that it was something that the community rallied behind.
Humane Society?
When the animal shelter expanded, there was an investment made there in capital. So that's not a new concept. The Senior Citizen Center asking for that is not foreign.
No, that's right, no.
I just think the city's budget provides a little bit more agility in how you apply your money versus the county governments and some of the other taxing districts. Cities, plural, Junction City, Perryville, Danville. We just have a little bit more agility.
And I assume that some of my fellow commissioners have heard the proposed amounts that the fiscal court is put in their budget to help some of these agencies. So we need to be aware of those, but we don't necessarily have to match them because they're talking about putting it in there, because we've always done what we thought was right for our community and for our own budget.
Yeah, so that's a good example. For example, the EDA PDI program, when I'm advocating that the city commission really probably shouldn't budget anything above the operations yet until we know what the fixed cost is and know what the stopping point of that roadway will be. But I think the county will show an investment there in their budget that they approve, just partly because it's easier for us to again, be more agile. We can do a proposed budget amendment as staff, and then you all can add that money at the time a little bit more efficiently than the county. So in other words, in simple terms, it's more necessary for them to budget an assumed amount there than it is you guys. You guys can wait for the real numbers to come in and just allocate their actual number, you know.
Anyone else? I know, Ashley, you and Mel want to make a motion to adjourn for me?
I just wanted to say thank you to Melanie, because she did a lot of work for the last 2.5 weeks, and I just want us to say thank you.
She exercises a lot of patience, and I know at like 12:38, I walked in there and said, finally I have an idea for the last slide. 12:42, okay. So in 18 minutes, she put together those last 2 slides, and we appreciate her for doing that. That was very skilled of her. So, but no, she's doing a great job, and they're the projects that we're seeking grant money for. She's got a good concept going there with a website dedicated for that, and so we'll have business cards with QR codes that we can hand out. That so if there's a federal official that wants access to what the Danville's future needs are of the federal government or state government, you know, you scan that QR code and it goes to a website where you can see our project list. I think 4 years ago, we had a handout where we had a bunch of these projects in a book. Well, she's elevated our game a little bit, and so we appreciate her for doing that and her patience with engineers like Marshall and Earl and Josh. It takes a lot.
You guys would take those things on your upcoming trip?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Anything else? Well, tell staff on behalf of the city commission, a great day, a lot of information, a lot of good Q&A time to ask questions about this stuff.
I hope you see that your community functions at a high level. The staff that was in the room, Danville's government operates extremely well. Not necessarily, it is all them. There is not a department head that doesn't value what they do for the community. Every one of them has gone above and beyond. I've witnessed it myself. And really, over the last 10 months, it's made the city, we've not missed a beat. And so, you know I personally appreciate that, and I've told them that. And, you know, I've been in situations where you got conflict and where things are tenuous and tense, and so, you know, I didn't fully tell them this, but this is for the staff, and this is me just bragging on those folks in an evaluation way. But I went to a management team meeting, and, you know, Lee was sitting there, and she was telling Tony something, and Melanie said, well, I want to do this, and this is what I got going on, and you know, you had one of the police, the police chief, you know, responded with, yeah, well, you just do what you want, it makes a lot of sense to me, whatever you think, and there was this harmony that existed in the room that I just want you to know that I witnessed, and I appreciate that, and I hadn't seen it in a long time. And so certainly you can see it through the group as a group, and I appreciate that. There's always water cooler talk and conversation, but I think that I personally appreciated it, and I think I told them thanks at the time, but I don't think they really knew why, but that was why.
Well, you read the text that I read at the end of the weekend, and someone said, it's been a long, 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 long night, and then it was followed by a smiley face. Well, that's just an example of what you're talking about. That when people that were questioning about things that someone's upset about, and they respond, hey, been up all night trying to take care of this, and bam, we got it resolved. So that was good. So with that said, commissioners, I'm waiting for that motion. Ashley, you want to, can't make one, can you? You guys make a motion over here? Somebody make a motion? Come on, Kevin, make a motion.
I move to adjourn.
Oh,
I'll second.
man, all right, there you go. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, stay long
Aye.
as you want to, right?
Aye.
You said aye, I heard you.
I'm still comfortable. I don't know what's wrong with y'all. I mean, I'm just as comfortable as I can be.
Are you ill?
No.